time where you think that if the England manager needs to give a metaphorical kick at the backside to some players, dropping him out of the England squad seems to be the first step in that direction. But got to get the club form sorted because they're just nowhere near it at this moment in time, are they?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And with Dele, it's not just that the performances have dropped off, the stats have dropped off with it. He peaked, arguably, and I'm willing to say now that he peaked as a whole in his career. 16-17 was the best that it will ever get for Dele Alli. 37 Premier League appearances for Tottenham, 18 goals, 9 assists. He's not going to do that again.
You don't think so?
I don't think he's ever going to do that again. 17-18, he gets 9 goals, 11 assists in the same amount of games. Last year, 5 goals, 3 assists. This year, 2 games played so far, no goals, no assists.
So do we look at that and say that he's the victim of his own early success as a footballer? Or is his career going to be front-loaded in the sense, as you say, it'll be the law of diminishing returns? So he starts wonderfully well, everyone pins the hopes on him, he fades away somewhat, but scales heights that very few would get anywhere near. Is that being a bit too romantic about the whole thing?
Well, no, we like a bit of romance here on Posh Boys on Drive. It's World Poetry Day, David, let's not forget. But I think you are right. I think he peaked, and there's an element there, I suspect, of defences working him out. When he arrived and he was scoring all those goals, his sort of signature move was that late run towards the back stick, working very well with Harry Kane. And I think Premier League defences weren't used to an attacking midfielder breaking the lines in that kind of way and looking to score goals. It's fair to say he has been asked to play deeper, so we can't expect him to score as many. But I think the novelty, he had this sneak attack surprise factor of being a kid from League One no one knew anything about, and no one knew how to handle him. They've worked him out.
And I suppose that's the real test of a player that we would deem to be, when you try and bracket them, whether they the Premier League class, international class, and then after that world class. So the world class player is able to do it year on year with the expectation that's heaped on him by himself and also by us in the media and the crowd that watch him. And the ones that reach the very pinnacle, that maximise what they've got, do it every single year. So he's set high standards for himself. I mean, I'd still go on the argument that he's still relatively young. He's not obviously just a baby, box fresh out of the Football League and in the Premier League, but still young enough to be able to work his way through a patch of form which is getting bigger by the week. And that's a test. And there's the developmental side of dealing with pressure at a club such as Tottenham that's demanding trophies, along with what the progression that's forthcoming is that we've all seen.
The feeling I always have when I watch Dele Alli, and I have it particularly when I watch him playing for England, is that he's trying too hard. And when he first broke through for Spurs and when he scored that amazing goal for England against France in his second appearance, he was playing with that freedom. He was trying things like, I'm going to shoot from 30 yards against Hugo Lloris because I can. Whereas now, it feels like every time he gets the ball, he has to do a Cruyff turn. He's got to do a Cruyff turn before he can do anything else. It's like he's bet someone, I will do a Cruyff turn. He's said to his mates, I'll do one and then I'll pass. But
John, I mean, there's a good point there. But I think why a player would do that, he's obviously a very confident lad. He has sometimes bordered on cockiness, I think, on a rare occasion. But if you're wanting a player to be creative, then they have to take chances. But even the most creative players that go through a fallow period, what you would tend to be told by coaches, staff, etc., teammates, more experienced teammates, is just simplify it. It's what we hear all the time in football, keeping it simple. I was listening to Roy Keane talk the other night a bit about being able to... Brian Clough told him that he could control a ball, pass the ball and run around. And he said, well, then I built a career on that. Yes, that's very self-deprecating when you went on to win what he won and how he played. But keeping it very simple and being efficient is what makes a very good player into a great player. So I think, yes, time's on his side, but because football is so transient and we're immediately wanting to be impressed by players every single time they go out on the pitch, is got to see this as a bit of a wake-up call for what the next portion of his career is, as not a junior in a side or one of the younger statesmen in a Tottenham squad, but as one of the more responsible, reliable, experienced members that takes that club onto where the supporters feel it should be going.
He's 23 now, 37 England caps, 3 goals. Not a great return for a broadly attacking player. But when we're looking back on a few years ago and saying, listen, Dele was at his best as a 20-year-old, have you got any experience of playing with or seeing young stars who break through and look amazing and actually that is the ceiling. For whatever reason, that is as good as it gets?
I was fortunate because the under-21 team that I was in, they all went on to do some pretty decent things. I get in the full squad and long and varied Premier League careers. I mean, one that springs to mind, and it's only recently because of all the fallout from his book, when Michael Owen talks about how the impact that he had. I mean, his was more injury-based, wasn't it? In the sense of the minute that he started feeling very fragile, hamstrings, etc., the pace of his game was his real natural attacking threat, and when that diminished, he found himself not unable to adapt. But that's the finger that's pointed at him, isn't it, by other professionals? So I still think, I mean, 23 in any other profession, as we well know, 23 is still very, very young. In football, you're into the real kind of meaty section of your not only your career of where you're going to be playing your best football, but where you can max out your earning power as well. And for these lads now, in the bracket that he's in, he plays the next 10 years right, and he'll, along with everyone else of his generation, will never have to work again once the boots get hung up. But I think there's a real test on for him to be able to adapt. Harry Kane's a great example of a teammate next to him that's consistently had the finger pointed at, is he going to do it again this year? Is he going to do it? And he has done it again this year, and suddenly he's England captain and the leading light. That's the example that you should be following.
Harry Kane, the four-season wonder. For Dele Alli, it's not just that things have been dropping off on the pitch. There have been, I think, issues off it. There was a video of him and Ross Barkley, I thought, being pretty unpleasant to a receptionist at a hotel. There have been other rumours about him which are unconfirmed, and there was, of course, one particularly suspect video which I won't go into the details of, but it showed him in, shall we say, an uncompromising position. Does that bother you, or is that part of being a young Premier League footballer?
It's part of a world that can be unfathomable, I think, to if you're the kind of man in the street that goes and pays, or the person in the street, I should say, that goes and pays to watch Tottenham week in, week out. The other unsavoury stuff is just that, leaves a bit of a harsh taste in the mouth. We want our footballers just to get on with playing football. They don't need to be angels off it by any stretch of the imagination, but just don't act like idiots. I think there's a better way of saying that, but it involves a swear word. But it's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? We all that other stuff melts into insignificance if he's doing wonders on the pitch.
Well, that is the point, and regardless of the morality, because frankly, I don't really care.
Don't worry, we're not sat here as moral arbiters by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the parallel that, as soon as you said that, Johnny, I'm thinking of Raheem Sterling with bits and pieces off the pitch, which seem to have really kind of quieted down, which seem to have been put into a little box, and he's got a manager that's completely got hold of him and developed his game, and they've won things. Therefore, almost kind of in his head, there's a switch gone that goes, well, hang on, if I do it this way, then riches, adulation, trophies come with it. Whereas maybe in a sense of Dele Alli at this moment in time, not necessarily a treading water pattern that they're in. Collectively, there's a few of them there at Tottenham that have got major kind of decisions to make about how they want the rest of their careers to go.
For Dele Alli, do you see a path back into that England squad?
Absolutely. I don't think the quality and the standard of player that he can be means that he should be part of the England setup. I think kudos to Gareth for picking who he wants to picking players that he believes to be banging form at absolutely the right time, and the broader spectrum of what England is now, that kind of familial feel means that he's not out the door completely, is he? It'll be that sense of kind of put him on a back burner to make sure that the next time these games come around and the intervening games in between gives him a chance to get his form up to speed.
On a different note, a fairly bizarre situation developing in London as we're talking. Our fan show presenter Charlie Hawkins joins us now. Charlie, afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I believe you've just seen a fairly lively bunch of Standard Liège fans at St Pancras. What's the latest?
Yeah, very lively Standard Liège bunch. They are truly making themselves known. I think they're just, I want to say they're having their fun. Don't want to say storming a teacup, but it's quite a bit of panic at the station.
Smoke bomb in a teacup, was it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was quite scary for 1 minute. I did think to myself, I was going to film it, just they were having a few sing-songs, but all the smoke bombs went off, and you literally couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So obviously, a very large police presence at St Pancras with them. But now the station's fully been closed down. a helicopter's present. It's all got a bit dramatic, but literally the iron gates are across all of St Pancras, the tube. The whole station had to get evacuated. So they're making themselves known only a few hours before kickoff.
Well, I tell you, it's David Prutton. I'm just, I mean, the way you're describing that, yes, there's a football match going on. Yes, there's an element of what European football nights can look like on the continent. Letting smoke bombs off in St Pancras, in one of the busiest cities on the planet, that's on, I mean, the most kind of high alert for any form of terrorist action. That's as ideas go, that's one of the most idiotic I've ever heard. If I was heading to St Pancras going anywhere this afternoon, I'd be absolutely fuming, regardless of who on earth's playing football tonight. That's a ridiculous state of affairs, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. I couldn't agree more. And the thing is, people, I mean, I don't know if you can actually hear that helicopter now above me, but the thing what is, when people are quite not sure what's going on, the panic, it really starts to create, doesn't it? And everyone started rushing out the station, and everyone senses that people are panicking. They start to panic themselves when it, hopefully it is just football fans and they're, having their fun, creating a bit of noise, but still it's organised chaos. And then everyone rushes out the station, and then people, there was old people, they're like, what was going on? And you never know really and truly when it was that bad smoke. You don't truly know, is this the worst of it? Is it going to get better? And I hate to sound dramatic, but obviously in that 1 minute, because I was like, I'll film it on my phone, the stupid idiot that I am. And I was like, actually, what's going on here? So you're never quite sure, are you, in those seconds?
Scary stuff. Charlie, thanks for keeping us in the loop. You are, of course, joining us for your fan shows this evening. Spurs fan show, 7 till 9, Charlton, 9 till 10, Southampton, 10 till half 10, and Forest up until 11. So we'll be speaking to you closer to 7 o'clock. David, baffling stuff.
That's the more I think about it, and having spent a portion of time over the last few years travelling in and out of London, up and down the country, going in and out of train stations, it annoys you when trains are delayed. It annoys you when people get in the way, walking down, staring at the phones. So many things annoy me about the transport links. But smoke billowing through St Pancras. It's astonishing the fact that's going on. And Charlie said, I don't want to be dramatic. Oh my God, you'd be sprinting out of that place because of what we know is the possibility of what can happen with mad people all over the planet. It's a staggering thing. I can't believe it.
Just a quick update on this, actually, because, of course, it has caused serious disruption to a lot of people. But the latest is, in literally the last couple of minutes, the Circle Line, Hammersmith and City, Victoria, Piccadilly, Northern Line, all tweeting that the station has just reopened, trains now stopping normally. But it is around an hour or so since, I think, the original incident was first alerted. So, massive disruption has been caused. I'm sure a lot of journeys have been disrupted. Let's hope Standard Liège get a battering from Arsenal tonight.
Exactly that guy. I've got no affiliation to Arsenal. I don't particularly like them. I hope they put 10 past them this evening. Utterly ridiculous.
I think that is what they deserve. Completely stupid. Smoke bombs in St Pancras as well. Sounds like a really underwhelming The Smiths B-side. Don't go anywhere.
Love sports.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Whoa! Look how much saturated fat is in these chocolate biscuits. It's surprising how much is in our food and drinks. For us kids, eating too much saturated fat can lead to harmful fat building up inside, which we can't see, increasing the risk of heart disease or stroke when we get older. So be food smart. Download the free Change for Life food scanner app and start making healthier choices today.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
If you're driving on a motorway and you see a red X sign overhead, you need to change lanes safely. Driving in a red X lane is an offence. Red X's are there for a reason, to protect you and others from danger. The lane may be blocked by a broken down vehicle or road workers, or the lane may be needed for the emergency services. So if you see a red X, change lanes safely. Highways England, connecting the country.
I have my own radio station too. It's called Love Trump Radio. The only station 100% fair and 112% factual.
This is Love Sport.
Well, after a total PR disaster of a week, athletics needed a hero. Step forward, Dina Asher-Smith. She made history last night. An extraordinary performance in the women's 200 metres, claiming that gold. A superstar overnight. She's going to do it in Tokyo as well, I'm sure. We're going to be talking about her, but we're also discussing the fallout from Alberto Salazar, so Mo Farah's former coach, who's been banned from athletics for 4 years for doping offences. And talking of dopes, purely in the sense of idiocy, Lord Coe, who's seen fit to, rather than putting his own house in order, give it large about Gabby Logan. He said it's very easy to sit there and make all sorts of Gabby Logan type judgments over 3 or 4 days. Well, we haven't got 3 or 4 days, Seb, but we have got 3 or 4 hours. We'll be making some judgments of our own very shortly. But first of all, I spoke to former world champion Ewan Thomas earlier and got his take on the brilliance of Dina. Ewan, thanks for joining us. 3 words for you. Dina Asher-Smith. She did it. She won the gold in the women's 200 metres. How good was that to see?
It was awesome. I told you she would do it. I wasn't sure she was going to win by that much of a margin, but she's just looked supremely brilliant through every single round. And I got to chat to her after. She started crying on the lap of honour, and she made my floor manager cry, who's 6'4" and huge. It was just lovely to see the emotions coming out of her, and all the Brits there really felt it for her. And she's such a lovely girl. I've said it before, and I'll always say it. Not only is she an amazing athlete, she's a marketeer's dream. She's got everything about her to be a global superstar, and she's just a nice girl. So there's no one else you want to see win, just her. Love her.
There are going to be people pointing at this win and saying, listen, some of her big competitors dropped out. It's not as good as it could have been. But actually, her time would have been good enough to win 13 of the 17 World Championships in this event. Is she just the best now in the 200 metres? Does this bode well for Tokyo?
It does. Look, at the end of the day, you can only beat who's there. She smashed the British record. She's run the fastest time she's ever run. She becomes the first Briton ever to win a global 200-metre title. She is the queen of the track. It doesn't matter who would have been there last night. I truly think she would have beaten anyone. If she can keep injury-free, she's just going to get better and better. And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't mind being her agent, because she's got everything about her to be a megastar. And honestly, everyone out here is delighted for her, because she's just so nice. She really is. And you've got to remember, in 2012, she was a kit carrier. She was one of the young girls walking around carrying the kit for the athletes, thinking, cool, it'd be good to be here one day. 7 years later, she's world champion.
Extraordinary stuff. What was the atmosphere like in the stadium? Were the fans there? Was it a bit more full? Were people going mad for her?
Yeah, I mean, it's not sold out, obviously, but everyone who's in there really is making a lot of noise. And I think for the athletes, it's all about having that tunnel vision and having that drive and that ambition to block out the crowd, block out any noise, and just give it everything. And when she came through the line, she almost just looked shocked that she won it. But it was never in doubt for me. All of us, my floor manager, the cameraman, we all said, yeah, she's going to win this easily. I knew she was going to win. I was that confident.
Has she got a good chance of a third medal in the relay as well?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Every time I've spoke to her, I've said, well, you know, you're there. After the 100 metres, she said, no, the job's not done yet. After last night, I said, well, job's done now. She goes, no, it's not. I've still got the relay. She's so focused. She knows the championships isn't just about the 200 and the 100. She's got the 4x1. And I tell you what, she wouldn't want to hear it, but she could run a blinding 4x4. If she ever wanted to do a 400 leg, she'd be the best at that as well.
Wow, Ewan, talking her up. Just finally, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, an absolutely searing start to the heptathlon. Can she finally get a world medal and a gold?
I hope so. I mean, she set 2 personal bests and 1 season's best out of the first 4 events, so she's clearly absolutely flying. Nafi Thiem, who is the world record holder, she's going to be good, the big Belgium athlete, but Katarina Johnson-Thompson, KJT, is very good at the last event. The 800 metres is her event, so it might all come to that, which is brilliant to watch.
And what's KJT like to deal with as a person?
She's nice as well. She's a little bit quieter than some. Quite often she just wants to keep her head down and get on with it. And obviously the multi-eventers, they don't have much time in between events. So every time I've tried to grab an interview with her, she's literally like, oh, do you mind? Can I skip it? Because I've got the high jump in 20 minutes. And I'm like, of course you can. So, she has to keep busy. She has to keep focused. And they're out there for 2 days, 2 grueling days. And one thing you will see at the end of the heptathlon, they're all like sisters. They get on so well. They all do a lap of honour. Whoever's won, they're all in it together. And I think they just respect the fact they've gone through so many events together, and they've just got respect for each other. And I think she'll get a medal. I would say she'll definitely get the silver, but I'm fingers crossed that she's going to get the gold.
It would be great to see. You and I should go up against each other in a heptathlon someday. I think it would be very interesting indeed, although you would have...
Only one winner there, Johnny.
Only one
Maybe
winner.
the high... You might have a chance in the high jump. I'll give you that one, but that'll be it.
You'd batter me there, mate, as well. Great to talk to you, as always.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for your time. Ewan Thomas, their former world champion, catching up with us all the way from Doha, and he'll be back with us on Love Sport Drive very, very soon. Great to chat to Ewan earlier. Always a pleasure. I am quite up for that heptathlon. He's the Olympic medalist, but I've got a few years on him. I think.
As in, you want to actively get involved with it?
Yeah, I think me versus Ewan Thomas. We can get Guy Watts involved. I'm sure there's a spot for you, David, if you'd like.
Would it be the roll neck Olympics? And we'll all roll neck it up and
for
see who passes out first in Doha.
It's fine. Apparently, the stadia are air conditioned.
If anything, they're too cold, apparently.
Yeah, people are going in and getting too cold from absolutely boiling outside.
I'd love to be part of this heptathlon. That sounds very fun.
I think we'll do it. But talking of people getting a bit hot under the collar, Lord Coe has struggled to contain himself this week. He's seen what is completely reasonable broadcasting and journalism from the BBC, who, as ever, to my mind, have been unbiased, impartial, and have simply asked questions about the destination because of largely empty stadiums. And he has gone in, not just on the BBC in general, specifically on Gabby Logan, which is out of order, saying it's very easy to sit there and make all sorts of...
it?
No,
you seem to take a great deal of
really offended there.
Joking aside, I think it is slightly worse when you've got one of relatively few major female sports broadcasters, and she's the one he's gone for. I know she's the one anchoring the coverage, but you do think, would you have done that to Gary Lineker in the same way? Anyway, he said it's very easy to sit there and make all sorts of Gabby Logan type judgments, not quite sure what those are, over 3 or 4 days and clear off back to match of the day. How is it that it is in some way unacceptable or cruel or cheating to raise serious questions where there are clearly visible concerns?
Johnny, it's not just wrong to question her doing her job as a journalist. The point is she's not the one making the judgments. If he's watched any of the coverage, then he'll see that she is asking the pundits who are there to give opinions for their opinions. So if anything, it's the Denise Lewis and the Michael Johnson style judgments. So, sorry, you're right over there.
I've just got an allergic reaction to roll necks. Go on.
Better than my thoughts on athletics, that's for sure.
To Sebastian Coe.
Yes, Sebastian Coe. Keep sneezing every time he says it. We'll have to have a code word for him. I think he's completely got this one wrong, and I think he's really embarrassed himself. He's embarrassed his sport as well. It's one of those where you and the people or the body you're representing are under pressure, so you come out swinging, but not only have you missed the intended target, you've sort of dug another hole for you and your organisation, and it's just another own goal for athletics. I mean, what was he thinking? There were any number of ways that with a good bit of, a PR doctor, if you like, he could have spun this somewhat positively. He could have said, well, we made a point of coming to a new market, a new area, a new part of the world where it's a growing phenomenon. And if we came back in 10 years, then it would be way better attended, and they don't even have to commit to doing that, and hopefully they wouldn't have. But do you see where I'm coming from? He didn't need to do this.
Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it, almost like we're sowing seeds to see them come to fruition way further down, almost trying to future-proof the future of athletics as a global sport, as a global participation for everyone to kind of actively go and watch. But we've got monitors here in the studio, and we're looking at it now, and you can't. I mean, even saying they're half full,
it's not true.
Remember, a complete lie.
They've covered vast swathes of the stadium with these huge banners to try and give the impression of being fuller than it looks, and it's still not half full at best. It's crazy. The best attended events, ironically, are the long distance events, which are not typically the best spectator ones, but because of the African migrant population being quite high in Doha, they love the long distance events because obviously that's what African runners are typically best at. So that is what the stadiums actually fill out for. So then you get the blue ribbon events, the 100 meters, 200 meters, what we, if you like, in the Western world and other parts of the world most enjoy watching, which
Well,
are
they're
on
the
in the
sexy
prime
ones
time
that you look
slots.
at, they really are.
Exactly, and there's no one there, and it's just horrifically embarrassing. And
what do you think about his comments when he's talking about basically saying the athletes that are moaning about it are the ones that aren't going to go on with medals? That was a bit. There was no real need for that. I mean, because there's only a finite amount of medals that you can win anyway in the actual competition, isn't there?
This is what has annoyed me most, because the whole thing smacks of arrogance. His delivery smacks of arrogance. His choice of words smacks of arrogance. He looks like that kid at school who has always been cool, always been popular, always good at sport.
You reckon he was popular?
And I reckon he probably was, or he certainly thinks he was, complaining
Big
that
difference.
the nerds are suddenly arguing back. He said, I was on the outdoor track, they're not talking about the crowds. Can I just be a bit blunt about this? The athletes talking about externalities are probably not the ones who are going to be walking home with medals from here. Go figure. He also said, we're on a journey now. He thinks he's some kind of spiritual leader. Shut up. There is no argument here.
But also, I mean, the journey that the marathon runners had to go on from midnight into the early hours of the morning just to try and compete in conditions that were favourable. Was it 40% of the women couldn't even finish because it was like ultra running? It was extreme, wasn't it?
You know what his response was when asked about that? He said, have you seen the medical facilities? They're so brilliant. It's like, why are you boasting
So when
about
you're on your
medical
knees,
facilities?
we've got someone to look after.
Exactly. It's like, talk about missing the point. It's just shocking. And yeah, I guess the point is, though, that if you choose Doha, Qatar as the venue, it's inevitable. You can't really defend it, can you? You've got to accept that everyone is going to realise that you've done it partly for the money. As Michael Johnson pointed out when he thought he was off air, the Olympic athletics legend, big BBC pundit, he thought he was off air. He said they did it because they're getting a boatload of cash. Obviously going to be at least partly true, and also said that Sebco himself was full of a four-letter word beginning with S that I can't repeat, which is quite amusing but quite telling as well that someone in the field thinks that.
And also being in a position that he's in, completely well respected. His history of dominance when he was actively participating in it. And he probably said something that, yes, from a broadcasting point of view, there's all kinds of people that have been in this position where they've slipped up. But there's not been many reports that I've read that have kind of disagreed with the sentiment of where he was going with it. Yes, it should have been put out there, but I was going, but he's kind of cut through a lot of things there to get to a point, hasn't he?
Very revealing indeed.
What I would like now is I would like a big star. I'm talking a Dina Asher-Smith, a Noah Lyles, a Katarina Johnson-Thompson, having won a gold to go, what are you doing? What are you doing hosting it here after the event? Because then Seb Coe going, oh, you're just whining because you're losing. No, we're not. We're whining because you made a terrible, terrible decision and you're not half as good at your job as you seem to think you are.
Love sport.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. This means that travelling to the EU will change. You'll need to check online if your passport is valid for travel to Europe. If you're planning on driving, you'll need to check if you have the right documents to drive. And make sure your travel insurance covers all your healthcare needs. To keep your trip on track, check what you need to do at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
This is Lionel, another very happy person who saved themselves money at aspokesmansaid.com.
Hi, I'm Lionel from Peacehaven. I took note of what the spokesman said and I saved £484 per year on my energy, and I recommend everybody does the same.
aspokesmansaid.com. Getting real people, real savings. Compare, switch and save with aspokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do, the smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
I love my brother. We do fun things like playing together. I like having hugs with Freddie. Freddie gives the best hugs. Freddie used to be very poorly, and the doctor said he might need a new liver. Then one day, a very nice person gave their liver to Freddie. It was amazing. We were so happy. Now he's around to give me more hugs than ever.
Tell your family you want to save lives. To find out more, visit organdonation.nhs.uk.
This is Love Sport.
You're listening to the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive with me, Johnny Burrow, Guy Watts and special guest David Prutton. Now, as David keeps pointing out, we are all wearing our roll necks, and this is in honour of World Poetry Day. We're not going to bring you any poetry, but I'm delighted to say we can bring you some literature, and some brilliant literature at that, in the form of 89, a fantastic new book written about that iconic Premier League or league win for Arsenal. We're joined on the line by Amy Lawrence, who's a football writer and author of 89. Amy, thank you for joining us. Lovely to speak to you. It's a great book. I love the way you've interviewed all of those relevant people, threaded their testimonies together. What inspired you to write it?
Hi, guys. Well, the first thing I have to say is I'm very relieved I don't have to recite a poem, because after that intro, I literally had a moment where I caught my breath and my stomach went, and I thought, oh, my God, they're not going to ask me to start off with something for National Poetry Day. Anyway, take a breath. So I suppose the idea really is it's a favourite moment, and I think anybody who loves football and anybody who grows up watching football and going to football has moments, particularly when you're young and you're impressionable and everything seems like you're experiencing something for the first time, that really knocks your socks off. And that happened to me with this particular game, which I think even 30 years down the line is infamous, famous, legendary, because it was one of the most dramatic episodes ever in English football. And the commentator at the time, the legendary Brian Moore, described it, I think, at the time as maybe the most dramatic finish in the history of the Football League. Of course, Football League, not Premier League. This was the time that predates the change in football. There's some people, we get statistics now, and everything has to be Premier League orientated, as if football began in 1992, I believe it was, if I remember rightly. But football before then was fairly extraordinary, and it was just a nice opportunity to try and, I suppose, deconstruct a very, very famous football moment and talk to lots of people who were involved, but also evoke a different time. I mean, no mobile phones, no social media. You could generally, in those days, walk up to a ground on a Saturday afternoon and with a couple of quid and get in and go and stand where you like. It was a really, really different time. Michael Thomas, who scored the winning goal, the goal that clinched the league, was, I think, on about £200 a week back then. So it was a very different era, and it's nice to be able to kind of have a bit of time travel, I suppose, and a bit of social history, and go back and relive how we consumed our football before the Premier League.
I mean, it is a real fascinating, as you say, an insight into a period in national football when, having had the benefit of being inside it to a certain degree, and then you look back at when you were a young kid and all you want to do is play football professionally and work your way up, and that the game that you watched on TV was the one game a week, the one game a month that was perhaps available to people to actually tune in and watch. And in the broader context of what was going on at the time, because you come off the back of that season in particular, the shadow of Hillsborough looms large, doesn't it? And it's loomed large over football ever since that happened. This happened, the game took place at the back end of May, and then you've got Italia 90 coming up the next summer. As you say, it feels like a real kind of chronicling of what football was, as you say, at that period in time, going from the darkness into the light of moving forward, and almost the rebirth, perhaps, of how we were viewed as a footballing nation.
Yeah, you summed it up brilliantly. I should have spoken to you before I finished this book. But yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you brought up Hillsborough, because one of the things that I, was super conscious of, if you're, some people quite rightly, without kind of taking the time to have a look or even wanting to, will say, well, how can you possibly write something that sort of glorifies something that happened in 1989 to do with football, when quite rightly the major thing that happened in that period, the effects are still being very much felt, and it did change football forever. Mm-hmm. And in a way, that was my experience as a 17-year-old lover of football at the time. Was I look back and I think how it's bizarre that the most extreme emotions I've ever had connected with being a lover of football happened within about 6 weeks of each other. And Hillsborough was the worst thing ever, and remains that. And the game at Anfield, where the team you love has got Mission Impossible, Not a Chance in Hell, written off as Men Against Boys. They've blown it for the first time that they might win the league for 18 years. Suddenly pulls off a miracle in the last seconds of the game, or last seconds of the season rather. So it's a strange dilemma almost, and I think again it adds to the sense that it was a really interesting period of time historically for the game. That there was almost a point back then where you thought, well, and even some of the players at the time, and these were players who were hoping to win the league for the first time ever, as far as Arsenal's team were concerned. Liverpool obviously won it virtually every year at that point in their history. But they almost felt, what's the point? Shall we give up the season? Why do we bother? In the immediate aftermath of Hillsborough, nobody knew what to do. It was a national tragedy of vast, profound significance. And there isn't really a rule book for something like that. You just have to sort of get by as best you can. But it did feel a bit like almost wrong to be going out and playing football after 96 people had lost their lives at a football match crushed by fences. But that was a very emotive period for everybody. And in many ways, there are all sorts of things that happened as the season reached its finale that only happened because of that episode. I mean, it wouldn't have even... The game was supposed to be the week after originally, Liverpool against Arsenal. It was the top teams challenging for the title that year, and it was evidently postponed. And they couldn't find a place to fit it into the schedule until after the whole season had finished. So 90 of the 92 teams had played all their football and were either on the beach or whatever. And it was the only match left, the only 90 minutes outstanding, happened to involve the top two teams who, according to a certain set of results, would mean that they were locked on points, locked on goal difference, and the only thing that decided who won the league that year was goals scored. It's absurd.
It's crazy, really, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely right there in the sense of that delicate balancing act that you've got to go through to get this book pulled together with the different sources that you've kind of spoken to, and the way you put it into context there is absolutely right, and it's done in the most respectful of ways. I truly understand the dilemma that you've got there about putting this forth into the public domain in the context of where it kind of sprung from. I mean, and having looked at the book, I mean, the names that are there that you've spoken to, and I'm just thinking about specifically the players here. When you've spoken to these players decades later, when you've caught up with them, when you've asked for their opinions on that specific lead up on the night and then the fallout. I mean, were they all on the same page? Did we get that wonderful thing where there's a rose-tinted view of their own history where there's slight kind of discrepancies? And was there a general feeling that you got as a group from those players? It seemed like a very genuine group of players together in the same situation that have shared something that will last with them for the rest of their lives, won't it?
I think so. And actually, one of the most remarkable elements to all of this is it made me think about how we remember things, and I was sort of a bit taken aback that you were talking to people who, 3 decades have gone by, people have grown up, had kids, grandchildren, different careers, all sorts of things. And when they sat down for a couple of hours and you start to ask in sort of forensic detail things that they remembered about that time, the memories were crystal clear in their clarity with everybody. And what's more, there was a kind of intensity about the way they were remembering it that made me think that if you're trying to remember something that happened that was really important to you, there's a capacity for the brain to somehow remember it in really strong detail. Like, if you ask me what I had for dinner yesterday, I don't think I can tell you. But asking people about things that really, really mattered, the clarity of recall was very, very intense, and everybody seemed to be almost back in the moment. And I thought that was amazing. And even fans, because I thought it was important to sort of stretch this out and almost in a way, the vibrations I was got about this event was it felt a bit like a footballing JFK moment, that everybody remembers exactly where they were, what they were doing, what their haircut was like, what clothes they were wearing, what they ate, who they talked to, what kind of conversations they were having. And again, the kind of the minutiae of detail that people remembered. What you ate 30 years ago on a particular day, or what video was playing on the coach back from the game, or what colour your underpants were or whatever. I mean, it really was that level of minutiae of detail that seemed to unite everybody, because they were remembering something that as if they really, really wanted to not forget it. And of course, nowadays it would all be recorded. Everybody would have probably, on a similar event, been taking reams and reams of footage on a mobile phone. Nobody even took a camera in those days. It's kind of locked in your head, and that's it.
Quite extraordinary. And when you're talking about remembering it, the book is very much billed as an oral history of this. And the thing that struck me when I was reading it is because you're using the player's own words, it really does feel as if you are being told a story in a very direct, very verbal way. How important was it to you that it should be told as if they were really speaking to you?
Well, I just thought I was going to get in the way if I started fluffing around. The power of their words was too good. So I just thought there was not much point in diluting that. So the craft really in trying to put it together was to tell that story as if you were sitting there with the players, George Graham, and what I thoroughly enjoyed as well was talking to people a bit on the fringes of the night. I was trying to build a picture of exactly what it was like throughout that a bit to an extent that era, but really crystallised on that day specifically. And the referee was fascinating. And the referee had never met his linesman before. I never ever did a game with him since. So the only time they ever met and worked together was in a game watched by about 50% of the population when live games weren't on telly very much.
It's not a bad
And there was a hotly disputed goal in the 52nd minute. And the referee had to go and talk to his linesman, and there was no replays.
I was thinking about Amy when I kind of revisit it. You're absolutely right. I mean, and especially this day and age, VAR, etc., etc., etc. It would literally those two fellas trying to bash it out, and the fascinating thing that came out of that was, I think it was the linesman or the referee himself saying the Liverpool players didn't even know what they were protesting for. The goal went in, and they would just go, "That goal can't stand. What's going on?"
No, I'm not accepting that. We're not going to lose this game.
Well, it was the old Fergie peer pressure thing,
Absolutely,
where you get enough
absolutely.
people surrounding the referee and the home crowd that sometimes it's going to just go for you. And I think they just thought they had to give it a go. But in a way, it was the length of a VAR drama, but 30 years before anybody had any technology. So, but everybody was certainly a bit on tenterhooks, thinking, if he gives the goal or doesn't, it sort of changes everything.
Amy, it's an extraordinary piece of work. I really enjoyed reading it. Just tell us, where can people get it from? How much does it cost? And why should they read it?
Oh, wow, thanks. Okay, sales pitch time. I would always say go to a good local bookshop if you can. They'll order it in if they haven't got it already. Otherwise, there's the big giant Amazon. It's also really fantastically on Audible, and I've not listened to many books by that way before. I tend to read them, but it's read by Alan Davis, the actor, an Arsenal fan. So that's quite a treat because it's got a real sort of fantastic energy when he's reading the book as well. So yeah, all those kind of usual places. Typical book costs, I think, not extravagant, but you can get a bit of discount at the moment because it's new. So I'd be really happy if anybody wants to dive into a bit of football history. And the other thing I would say, and it sounds like a terrible advert, but it occurred to me the other day, it's quite a good toilet book.
Don't say that.
Because it's an oral history, you can dip in and out really easily. It's not like you've got to keep track with the story. It's like lots of little impressions of things. So, if you feel like you need something to sit next to the downstairs loo, go for it.
Well, that
should go on the back somewhere. That's got to go on the back somewhere. Come on.
Quite the plug. Amy, great to speak to you. I am sorry for making you do a sales pitch, but at least we didn't ask you to recite a poem. Lovely to speak to you. Thanks for your time. Amy Lawrence there, who is a football writer and author of her sensational new book, 89, all about that incredible Arsenal title win. Lots more to come in the show. Not least, we're going to be talking a different book, a different author, Nick Fry, former CEO of Mercedes and Brawn GP Formula One teams, is going to be in the studio discussing his new book, Survive, Drive, Win.
Giving your team the coverage they deserve. Love Sport Radio.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. Brexit will bring changes that affect businesses in many ways, particularly if you buy from EU suppliers, sell to EU customers, provide services to EU clients, and receive customer data from other businesses in the EU. Businesses need to prepare. Find out how at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
AsSpokesmanSaid.com is a leading price comparison website that allows you to compare every energy tariff on the market in seconds. We have more deals than any other comparison website offering energy prices, and our impartial independent switching service is free of charge. Nearly 50% of UK households have switched bills, and there are hundreds to be saved. Visit AsSpokesmanSaid.com, as recommended in The Guardian, The Times and The Sun. AsSpokesmanSaid.com.
I've heard that England does not have a kidney bank, but it does have a Liverpool.
This is Love Sport.
Well, back in 1989, football players wouldn't have had easy access to the CEOs of their former clubs. They certainly wouldn't be able to have a pop at them publicly. Fast forward to 2019 and all that has changed. Hans Watzke, who is the CEO of Borussia Dortmund, fired a few shots at star Arsenal striker Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang yesterday, suggesting he only went to North London, in his words, to improve his bank balance. Aubameyang not having any of that and has just tweeted, "Better for you, I never talk about why I really left Dortmund, Mr. Watzke. You are such a clown. I remember that time you said we were never going to sell Ousmane Dembele. Then you saw more than 100 million and you were the first to take the money." Laugh crying emoji, rock and roll emoji. Don't talk about money, please. Leave me alone, please. David, sensational stuff, particularly the emojis.
Why the rock and roll emoji? I
really don't know.
Completely out of context.
He's on one. He's absolutely on one. My first question for you is simple. Have you ever been tempted to have a pop at a former employer, say, or a former teammate on a rather public forum?
Not in the slightest, no. Not saying I'm mates with everyone and will always remain mates with anyone. There's probably, I mean, what has been said back at Dortmund is not too false. It's got. I mean, he'll be a very wealthy man.
It's pretty unnecessary, though,
It's unnecessary, but if you looked at what was necessary and unnecessary and filed things in the appropriate under the appropriate titles in football, we could be here for quite a long time because it's a cheap shot. It's not a cheap shot in the sense of the numbers that he's talking about, but it's definitely a cheap shot. And maybe it stings a little bit because Aubameyang knows that he's not played in the Champions League with Arsenal. Is he gonna get back there with Arsenal?
Is he gonna?
That's the thing. I mean, Europa League. There you go. You say, is the Europa League the best route to getting anywhere near that competition? We don't know. The season will unfold as we watch it and see where his team ends up. When you see it said in this type of context, and I mean, he makes a good point about Dembele. I mean, even though Dembele's kind of gone to Barcelona and fallen off a cliff, basically. It suits these huge financial decisions more often than not, especially at this very top level. They seem to suit everyone nowadays. There's not too many. The club might be gutted that someone's moved on, but the recompense is there. You know what I mean? They're not having the pants pulled down by any stretch of the imagination. They're getting decent money in for these players, and then the players are in turn becoming very wealthier men on the back of a transfer and different wage structures. So, I mean, Thursday night football in Europe's not perhaps why he came wandering over to the Premier League, is it? But that's just the current state of affairs at Arsenal at this moment in time.
I don't know. I think there's an interesting question of whether the size of the club is straightforwardly dictated by the European competition they're playing in. Because Dortmund have been very successful for the last 10 years, and I know they won a Champions League years before that. But Arsenal are a bigger club than Dortmund. Arsenal can be playing in the Europa League, and I think most players in world football would rather play for Arsenal than Dortmund.
I mean, it's the same argument that we have, around Man United, isn't it?
And the situation there where you're going to have players going to United because they're Manchester United. Manchester United might not be a Champions League club, but they still have that appeal and that mystique.
That's right, Johnny. And as a Man United fan, long may that continue in spite of our travails that we have documented, of course, so well here on this show. I wanted to move on just to a little bit of cricket because there has been a quite significant event take place earlier today, which is the launch of the, shall we say, much discussed new tournament, the 100. I was going to say maligned, but that is, well, true, not necessarily the full story. But what has happened is the England players, the players on England's central contracts have been allocated to the new franchises. It's going to be an 8 franchise competition that starts next year. It's going to run for a month in the middle of the summer. A new tournament that's going to be 100 balls per innings. It's going to have scoreboards that only have the number of runs scored and required and the number of balls left, of course, counting down from 100, a nice round number, although unhelpfully not one that is divisible by 6, the typical number of balls in an over in cricket, of course. So it's going to be a new experience for everyone. Whether you're an ardent cricket fan or whether you're new to the game, it's going to be something new to you. And the news that you might be interested to know about today is which players have gone where. So the way it works is that each franchise gets one England centrally contracted player, and that's generally speaking kind of done by which county you play for. So Chris Woakes playing for Birmingham Phoenix, Josh Butler for Manchester Originals, Ben Stokes has been chosen by the Northern Superchargers. The Northern Superchargers based in Leeds but incorporating both Yorkshire and Durham. So they had a choice of Joe Root, Johnny Bairstow or Ben Stokes. They've unsurprisingly, to my mind, certainly gone for Ben Stokes. Sam Curran for the Oval Invincibles, what a good name that is. Joffrey Archer for Southern Brave, Joe Root for the Trent Rockets, and Johnny Bairstow for Welsh Fire. Rory Burns as well for London Spirit, which is going to be Lords based. And then they've had a couple of local icons given to each franchise as well. So Owen Morgan, for example, at London Spirit, Moeen Ali at Birmingham Phoenix, players like Adil Rashid and David Willey at the Northern Superchargers, Tom Curran and Jason Roy at the Oval, Chris Jordan, James Vince at Southern Brave, and so on. So there's a few really big, high-profile players attributed to each franchise straight away and try to evenly spread them.
Northern Superchargers, Southern Brave. This all sounds a bit American to me.
Is it even as good as that? I don't know.
It's nowhere near as good as that. I was just looking at the name. I mean, have we got a favourite name there, chaps, out of all the ones we've seen?
I think Oval Invincibles is, well, I was going to say hard to beat, but that would end up sounding like a terrible pun. Oval Invincibles, hard to get worse than, I would say. The others, Manchester Originals. I mean, I don't really get that personally.
The real McCoy.
Welsh Fire, I guess, playing on the old cliche there. One of the other things I wanted to pick up on, obviously we'll talk a little bit more about this during the show, but they've obviously done some new promotional pictures for the event, and so we're seeing the kits for the first time, and there's quite an interesting theme of the sponsors for the kits. And you've got the Oval Invincibles being sponsored by KP the Peanuts, you've got Tyrrell's Chris sponsoring London Spirit, Skips sponsoring one of the teams, Hula Hoops another, literally McCoy's sponsoring another, Johnny, but I don't think that's the Manchester Originals, which would have maybe made a bit more sense. Pop Chips as well, you've got Butterkist with another sponsors. I don't know, I hope it's not as simple as they're trying hard to get a new young audience, and so they think kids are going to like these.
Yeah, young obese children, is that who they're after?
I mean, talk about a conflict.
That's exactly what. Yeah,
it's not.
Come
ideal.
and watch the cricket, fill your faces, and waddle home.
Yeah,
but there is an element of that when you go and watch the cricket, isn't there?
I guess, Johnny, but it slightly goes. It's all well and good getting a new audience involved, but if they're then going to be, massively encouraged to scoff a load of hula hoops followed by Butterkist toffee popcorn.
Maybe the 100 is actually the target. You've got 100 balls. If you can't eat 100 hula hoops in that time, we will eject you.
If you
the
don't,
rest of the
if you
tournament.
don't put on 100 kilos by the end of the season, then you don't get to renew your season ticket.
It
I
is
don't know.
baffling.
We'll have a bit more on that later in the show, but that was earlier today.
We will. We'll be getting our teeth into the 100 and all of their sponsors throughout the show. We're going to be talking athletics, England squad, and of course a bit of F1. Don't go anywhere.
Love sport.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. Brexit will bring changes that affect businesses in many ways, particularly if you buy from EU suppliers, sell to EU customers, provide services to EU clients, and receive customer data from other businesses in the EU. Businesses need to prepare Find out how at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
Think the energy price cap will save you money? Think again. You could be saving a lot more on cheaper energy tariffs. Price comparison site A Spokesman Said will show you just how much money you could be saving against your current tariff. Don't throw away your hard-earned money to the energy companies. Check out aspokesmansaid.com and you could switch to cheaper bills in minutes.
Spokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
My mum and dad say that I don't need lots of sugar. I'm sweet enough already. So we used the Change for Life food scanner app to find out how much sugar is in our food and drink. It's surprising how much we found. So I put my detective hat on to find the healthier choices. Woohoo! Found one, Mum! You can be food smart too. Download the free Change for Life food scanner app today.
We've got a cracking hour coming up for you on Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. We're going to be joined in the studio by Nick Fry, who's the former CEO of the Mercedes and Brawn GP Formula One teams. He's discussing his new book, Survive, Drive, Win. We'll be talking what it's like to work with the likes of Hamilton, the likes of Schumacher firsthand. That's going to be really extraordinary. We're also going to be chatting to James Simpson-Daniel, the former England winger, about the Rugby World Cup, talking Dina Asher-Smith, Lord Co, and of course the England squad. But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
On digital radio, online, mobile and smart speaker. This is Love Sport News.
From the Sky News Centre at 4, a man's been shot dead at the police headquarters in Paris after 4 officers were killed in a knife attack. The motive isn't yet known for the incident, which happened around lunchtime near the Notre Dame Cathedral. The European Council President says he remains unconvinced about Boris Johnson's Brexit proposals. Donald Tusk's been holding talks with the Prime Minister about his plans, which include changes to the Irish backstop. Earlier in the House of Commons, Boris Johnson issued this warning.
If our European neighbours choose not to show a corresponding willingness to reach a deal, then we shall have to leave on October the 31st without an agreement. And we are ready to do so.
The government's welcoming a High Court ruling which says that raising the state pension age for women was lawful and did not discriminate. Campaigners argued they didn't get enough warning and the changes affected their retirement income. There are reports Hong Kong's government is going to announce a ban on face masks. It's after a spike in violence in recent days between the police and pro-democracy activists who often try to conceal their identity. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford, who's there, says this week protesters have been on the streets like never before.
They smashed up the CCTV cameras, they smashed up the advertising billboards, they took over the road, and then the police turned up and started firing tear gas. That has dispersed the crowd for now.
There are further fears the UK slipped into recession. It's because figures show a contraction in the services sector, which is the biggest part of the economy. And in sport, Chelsea youngsters Tammy Abraham and Fikayo Tomori have been included in England's squad for the Euro 2020 qualifiers with the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. They're also eligible for Nigeria, but would be committed to Gareth Southgate's team if they play in either match. That's the latest. I'm Kit Bradshaw.
Love Sport Radio. On digital radio, online, mobile and smart speaker.
This is the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive.
Good afternoon, it's the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. You're with me, Johnny Burrow, Guy Watts and special guest David Prutton, former Leeds and Forest midfielder. We're with you till 7. Our top stories this afternoon. We're reacting to Gareth Southgate's England squad. Dele Alli not in there. Is there a way back into the international fold for him? We're talking Dina Asher-Smith's brilliance. 200-metre gold. Can she get another one in the 4x100? We're continuing our discussion of the fallout from Alberto Salazar's doping ban. He is, of course, the former coach of Sir Mo Farah. And we're talking Lord Coe, who's decided he doesn't like Gabby Logan very much. But for now, we are privileged to be joined in the studio by Nick Fry, who is former CEO of the Mercedes and Brawn GP Formula One teams. Nick, lovely to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. You are, of course, discussing your new book, Survive, Drive, Win, which tells the genuinely extraordinary story of that 2009 season and what you all managed to do with Brawn GP. We talk a lot about Leicester and that Premier League win, 5,000 to 1. This blows that out of the water, doesn't it? Give us some context about why this was so extraordinary.
Well, this is definitely the Leicester of Formula One. Probably more so because, firstly, it's a hugely expensive sport, and at the end of 2008, the year before we actually won the championship, we were pretty much out of business. It's a team that was owned by Honda. Financial crisis came along, Lehman Brothers went down, all sorts of nasty things happened, and they decided, quite understandably, that they could no longer afford to do Formula One. So just before Christmas 2008, they said, we're off and find someone to buy the team. And, as you would expect, the only people who were considering buying a Formula One team at that time were fairly undesirable in the main. So we met some interesting characters, and in the end, the only option was for Ross Brawn and myself to end up owning the team. So we paid them £1. We took on all the liabilities. We had 700 employees, salary bill of a couple of million a month, and off we went, not expecting to really survive probably more than a year. But history was very different, and we won the championship with Jenson Button, and the team's gone on to be probably the most successful Formula One team of all time.
It is, of course, now Mercedes, effectively, with Lewis Hamilton doing incredible things, and an incredible achievement back then. But if I may, what on earth possessed you to do it? I mean, buying this team, with Honda having stopped their involvement for £1, taking on all those liabilities, that is the kind of risk that even thinking about it makes my palms start sweating. Why did you go for it?
I think it was a fairly bonkers thing to do, and I have to say Mrs. Fry and Mrs. Brawn were unimpressed. I think their view, quite rightly, was that all of us were going to end up probably in a caravan for the rest of our lives. But being serious about it, it was one of those things where there seemed to be no option. I mean, there was 700 employees, 700 families. It needed leadership. We were the bosses. The worst thing probably that could have happened is we'd have gone bust a year later than we were due to go bust anyway. So, we thought we'd give it a go. But really, there was no expectation that we'd be other than midfielders.
It's a fascinating... I mean, the way that Johnny puts that into perspective there, when you read stories like this, when you hear about wonderful people that take genuine chances and have the ability and the confidence and the balls, if you like, to be able to go and take these chances, then does the element of doubt ever creep through your mind? And if it does, is that kept very privately, very kind of confidentially, because you want to make sure that outwardly everyone's going, well, there's a boss, he knows what he's doing, let's follow this fella over the hill?
Well, from the outside point of view, we had to make it very clear that we were going to survive. So we spoke, I spoke a lot very early on about having sort of 20 people who were interested in buying the team, which was technically true, but I think 19 and a half of them you wouldn't have trusted to run the corner shop. Right. So, you've got to present a positive picture. You've got a lot of employees with highly skilled people that you want to keep on side. So it was a matter of being very confident. I have to say that for Ross and I, Ross came into my office one day and one morning and looked at me and said, "Doesn't do much for your libido, this, does it?" And he was quite right. I mean, it was a real roller coaster ride, and we came perilously close on numerous occasions to shutting the doors. But you just give it your best shot and work hard. And in this particular case, we came up trumps. Mm-hmm.
You had an extraordinary couple of drivers in Jenson Button and Rubens Barrichello, but talk to us a bit about that car, because an extraordinary feat of engineering, but you had a borrowed engine, you had all kinds of elements which you weren't even sure were going to work together. There were questions about whether it would survive a Grand Prix, and yet you ended up with a huge advantage which your competitors didn't have, and if we're honest, they weren't very happy about.
No, we were very unpopular because we and in fact two other teams, Toyota and Williams, actually came up with an aerodynamic idea known in the trade as the double diffuser, and it was in a grey area in the rules. The diffuser is the sort of the wing that's upside down underneath the car, and it sucks the car down onto the track, and it's very, very closely controlled because it's a very powerful device. I mean, these are cars that at 60 miles an hour, technically or theoretically, they could drive upside down. So if you had a tunnel and they could go from one way up to the other way up, they'd be quite happy upside down at about 100 kilometers an hour. So it's an incredibly powerful thing, and the dimensions are very closely controlled. But a Japanese engineer that we had working for us observed that there was this area which was debatable, and we ended up with a diffuser that was effectively double the size of and power of others. So, but we did a bloody good job. I mean, the other teams that had it had the same idea, but their execution of the idea wasn't quite as good as ours. So that was probably 50% of our improvement from 2008 to 2009. The other half of the improvement was frankly changing from the engine we had to the Mercedes engine. So we went to the best engine on the grids, but it was very much cobbled together. This doesn't sound like much, but the engine was sort of half an inch higher than it should have been, which in Formula One terms really should put you at the middle of the grid, if not the back of the grid. But we had such a big advantage in aerodynamics and the engine that we managed to get a flying start and won most of the Grand Prix at the start of the season.
Well, you ended up with a car that Jenson Button said was capable of dancing on its tyres, which is an extraordinary phrase. But take us back to the beginning of that season. Take us back to that first weekend in the Australian Grand Prix. How were you feeling beforehand? What was it like watching it, and how were you feeling afterwards?
Well, we weren't feeling overly confident. We knew we had a really quick car. I mean, we went testing. We only participated in the last test before the start of the season because the car just simply wasn't ready. But that test, we were really quick. I mean, massively quick compared with the others. And the car reacted, really well. As Jenson said, it really was a car you could do anything with. It was delightful to drive. But we didn't have any sponsorship, and we hadn't done any mileage on the car. And these things are very, very complicated, so that they can be incredibly unreliable unless you drive them around in circles rather a lot and make sure that you iron out all the bugs. So we had a car that we weren't sure was going to finish the race. We didn't have any money, but it was an exciting time in that we had the potential and. Luckily, Richard Branson and Virgin came along with some money, and we had Richard at the first race, and he's just a publicity machine and managed to attract a number of other sponsors, a company called Henry Lloyd, which is a sportswear company, a Swiss insurance company. So we had a bit of money coming in the door, and we went to Australia and... we blew them away. I mean, we were first and second by a country mile. It was hugely emotional.
Was there any? I mean, the discussion between yourselves and the drivers. I mean, was there an outline of where you wanted the season to go, of where you want to be in your wildest dreams, where reasonably you believed you were going to finish up?
Before we drove the car on the track, we thought if we could get into the top half, maybe fifth in the championship, that would be a stretch objective because the thing was, cobbled together. When we got the car on the track, there were people. The mechanics sort of disappeared from the garage after one lap on the track, and most of them were on the line to their bookies, putting their bets on because these things usually work or they don't work. I mean, if your car is on the track for the first time and it's a complete dog, then probably you're going to have a really difficult season ahead of you, and it's going to be really, really tough. If you go on the track and it's just wow, then it's a pretty good indicator that you're going to have a great time. And so we were really hopeful of a good result, but even then we didn't anticipate winning the championship until really we got to Australia and proved out that the thing worked as we hoped.
Nick, you've had a long and storied career. You've worked with some of the biggest and best names in Formula One, the likes of Schumacher. You were the first person to bring Hamilton, for example, into F1. But of those people, who is the best driver you've ever worked with?
Well, I mean, I think Lewis really is very special indeed. And, the reason he gets paid the big bucks is that he makes a difference. And, the top drivers, the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, the reason they're getting paid so much money and they are, courted and loved is that, they can take a car which really should be in second place and they'll get it to win. They're not going to be able to take a car from the back of the grid and put it on the front row. That's just simply, impossible. But, they'll score goals when you shouldn't score a goal. And, it's the similar situation to, maybe a Ronaldo or a Messi. They just, they're going to get them in the net and they're going to win races when maybe the car's not quite up to it. And there are lots of other drivers who, are incredibly good. And it's almost unfair to sort of classify them as the sort of class 1 and class 2, but the A+ guys like Lewis and Michael are very special.
And obviously, when you're dealing with brilliant colleagues, I have this problem with David Prutton.
I can see where he's going with this.
Sometimes they are a bit temperamental. There are egos in the way, all kinds of problems. Is there anyone who was perhaps slightly difficult to work with?
The most difficult one was right at the start of my Formula One career. Who's a man called Jacques Villeneuve, who did make world champion, but had a sad background. His father was one of the icons of Formula One, Gilles Villeneuve, and died in a horrendous accident at the Zandvoort race circuit when Jack was a kid. And I think maybe his upbringing wasn't perhaps what it would have been had things been different, and he was pretty difficult, but he was only around for the first couple of years of my Formula One career, and then we moved on to Jensen, who in the main was a pleasure to deal with.
He seems like a lovely guy, I have to say. And when you're looking at the current landscape, with Hamilton, of course, dominating completely for the first half of the season, others starting to get a foot in the door now, what do you make of it? Who is the greatest? Who's going to come through once Hamilton is done?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that the young Ferrari driver Leclerc is very special indeed, and one of my old race engineers, Jock Clear, who was with us in the 2009 season, is now with Ferrari, and he assures me, as is now very obvious, he's the real deal. But it presents some serious challenges, and you can see that happening at the moment, where you've got the young up and coming, clearly world champion of the future, and you've got Sebastian Vettel, who with the best will in the world is on the sort of latter part of his career, and it sets up some really difficult challenges.
And we've seen that recently with Vettel, from a total outsider to F1. For me, acting like a total moron, acting like a petulant child. If he'd done that for one of your teams when you were competing for a world championship, how would you have felt?
Well, it wouldn't be a matter of feeling. It's what you do, and at the end of the day, whilst the drivers are the stars of the show, they are employees, and they have to understand that this is a team sport, and you've got to manage that situation, and ultimately. We got to that stage a couple of times with Jensen and Rubens. They crashed into each other, on one occasion. You've got to make it clear who's the boss, and it's all about the team. And you can't have two drivers warring with each other. And ultimately, regardless of how talented they are, one needs to go. It's a bit like having a football match, a football team, and someone is playing a different game from the other 10 players, and you just simply can't have that. So but they've got to put their foot down.
Would you ever see it get physical in that instance between drivers? Obviously, like you say with footballers, it's all talk. It's all kind of huffing and puffing.
TV,
It'd be fantastic.
It was,
gloves off, helmet off, having a dust up on the track.
No, there's a fantastic. If anyone looks at YouTube, you'll find James Hunt, the great James. Actually at Crystal Palace in South London in a Formula 3 race before he got to Formula 1, and they crash. I think it's a guy called David Morgan. He crashes into just before the finish line, and they get out, and so James goes over and lays one on him. So
Wow.
not that I'm encouraging that type of thing, but
I think you found a gap in the market.
It's emotion.
It is indeed. And when you're trying to reel them in, the message surely has to be clear. Survive, Drive, Win, which is the title of your book. Absolutely fantastic. Just tell us, where can people get hold of it? How can they get hold of it, and why should they?
They can get hold of it on the likes of Amazon or Waterstones or your local bookshop. It's on sale from today. I think, why should they read it? If for the Formula One fans, 75% of it they won't know. I say with great certainty. I mean, everyone knows the story of the racing season, but this is a bit about that. But it's clearly much more about hiring Lewis. It's about working with Michael. It's about the trials and tribulations of Honda pulling out and making the team survive. There's a business story there, so I think for people who are interested in the business of sport, that's very, very interesting. I think number one reason, apart from the fact it's a jolly good-looking book and it'll make a great Christmas present for Uncle Fred or Aunt Maud who like sport, but any money I make out of it is going to charity. So I'm a great supporter of a cancer charity called Hope for Tomorrow. They provide. They've got 12 buses which go around the country. And the problem with a lot of cancer treatments is that for someone, especially if they're older or indeed if they're younger, if they haven't got their own transportation and they live in the countryside, it could be, an hour and a half on the bus or the train. And then they hang around at the hospital maybe for a bit and have treatment, which probably only lasts 20 minutes. And then they go through the process in reverse. And what Hope for Tomorrow does is provide buses with nurses and with the appropriate equipment on board. It will drive to a village or a locality in the suburbs, and then you will have your treatments with 3 other people who are going through the same issues. And the camaraderie that builds up is fantastic. So hopefully we can raise a bit of money for Hope for Tomorrow. Race Against Dementia is another charity that we try and support, and also the Halo Project, which Damon Hill, the ex-world champion, his son's got various issues, and that charity sort of helps him and other kids to give people with disabilities and problems, the confidence to live their own lives. So, if you do care to buy the book and buy it for Uncle Fred, then
it's fantastic.
If we make some money out of it, then it'll go to a good cause, not to me.
Nick, fantastic causes. You're an extraordinary guy with an extraordinary story. Thank you for joining us. Nick Fry there, former CEO of the Mercedes and Brawn GP Formula One teams, discussing his new book, Survive, Drive, Win. It's out today. Go and get your hands on it.
This is Love Sport.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Have you had enough of extortionate energy bills? A spokesman said could help you find the cheapest energy deals on the market. Don't take our word for it. There's hundreds of spokesman said customers who've saved big. Brian from Derbyshire saved £400 on his energy bills, and Tony from Northampton saved a massive £2,800 on his gas and electric. A spokesmansaid.com, the leading price comparison site where you can switch to the cheapest energy tariffs on the market in just minutes.
thespokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Driving too close to the car in front gives you less time to react. You may not realise that you're tailgating. Leave a 2-second gap between you and the vehicle in front. When it's wet, leave a 4-second gap. By staying back, you give yourself time to react. Stay safe. Stay back. Highways England, connecting the country.
Last time I was in the UK, I met National Treasure Mary Berry's grandmother, Elderberry.
Love sport.
One of our top stories today is, of course, Gareth Southgate's England squad and Dele Alli's omission from it. If I was picking the squad, he wouldn't have got close. And my worry for him, I'm not messing around, David.
No, you're not today.
And my worry for him now is that he's too far down that pecking order. He's well behind Mason Mount. He's well behind James Maddison. He's going to be well behind Ruben Loftus-Cheek when he's back from injury. We've got more exciting young players coming through, the likes of Willock at Arsenal. I'm not so sure he's got a place in that team.
Maddison seems like the one, doesn't he? Because he's really stepped up to the Premier League and slotted in so well with what Leicester are trying to do with Brendan Rodgers. The Mason Mount one, yes, he started very brightly in the Premier League. Still needs a hell of a lot more experience, I think, to completely uproot Dele Alli out of the system altogether. And it's the life cycle that we see of footballers that some, as we said earlier on, blossom very early and tail off. Some blossom very early and stay the course and then become world class. For Dele Alli, it feels like this is a time in his career when he's got to not necessarily look at himself in the sense of sort yourself out, but kind of wonder what the next step is, where he's going to go, what he wants to do with the next portion of his career, and being, I'm sure he's been in contact with Gareth Southgate. I'm sure the discussion's been there about the possibility of what happens next and what the next squad would entail. But it's the nature of football. It's constantly competitive. You might be the young bright thing, but there's a younger brighter thing that's snapping at your heels relatively soon.
I'm terrified. It applies in broadcasting too, I'm sure. It is interesting that just a few years ago, 2016-17 season, Dele Alli scores 18 Premier League goals. And when you're talking about young, bright things, there was no one, well, there were people younger, but there was no one brighter. He was the attacking midfielder, the young attacking midfielder who every elite club wanted. We were hearing rumours of a potential move to Real Madrid, maybe Bayern Munich. And you believed those rumours.
Oh, it wasn't paper talk. I mean, it didn't seem too far-fetched either, did it?
No, and now you think, well, if it's not working at Tottenham, where would he go? West Ham?
Where's his next port of call? Oh, I don't think he's that bad. I think he's a player that any of the top 6 clubs in England would have. I really do think that. I mean, there's an element of when you look at him and you think maybe, just maybe, in what's happening at Tottenham this moment in time, that there's a lot of fog, isn't there? There's a lot of uncertainty. If Jurgen Klopp got hold of him, if Pep got hold of him, wow! I mean, look what he's done with Raheem Sterling.
Do you think we'd be dealing with that kind of development?
I think so. I think because of the relative age of the player as well, because Pep can do it and Jurgen Klopp can do it with players of all ages, not just young players that turn him in. He's managed to modify. They both managed to modify players of different ages.
Well, look at James Milner.
Exactly. And it's the way that they approach how these players approach their game and then take them on to the next level. And maybe Dele Alli it's like the debate with Harry Kane about staying in one place for too long. Sometimes the grass can grow around your feet, and I think the next port of call, I'm not saying he should hand in a transfer request. I'm not saying he should disappear anyway in January, but that's an option. If the money's right, as Daniel Levy's pretty prone to doing, if the money's right, things get sorted. Maybe a fresh challenge freshens up, as I said, this next portion of his career.
Yeah, if you will, just cast your mind back 18 months almost to the day Mauricio Pochettino, his Spurs manager, described him as the best 21-year-old in the world. That was on the 16th of March 2018. 2 weeks later, I was at Stamford Bridge, where Spurs beat Chelsea at Chelsea for the first time since 1990, first time in 28 years. I had a brilliant view for Eric Dyer playing the ball over the top, Dele Alli bringing it down first time and poking it past whoever was in goal for Chelsea that day, probably Thibaut Courtois. It was a fantastic goal, and it put Spurs, I think, 2-1 up. And the Spurs fans went absolutely wild over in the far corner. It was a brilliant goal, and at that moment, you probably would have been quite hard pushed to say that Poch was wrong. But looking back now, that sort of comment doesn't look so wise, not just because, obviously, he's dropped off, but you do wonder a little bit, would that have had any impact? I'm not saying Pochettino's to blame, but if you're a young player, if you're only 21 years old, I mean, for us looking back to that age now, you think, blimey, you know, I'm not that grown up now. I certainly wasn't when I was 21. And if you've got someone saying you're the best of your age in the world, probably would do slightly funny things to your head, wouldn't it? And
it was hard for me.
You got through it.
I was talking to David, actually.
I think you're absolutely right, that guy, because it is it's so important, those formative experiences of a younger player. Yes, they've got to be tough on the pitch, but they've got to deal with so much off it. And the minute the manager comes in and starts blowing smoke up the right places, then does it turn your head? It depends very much on the individual. But I think what kind of sets in motion there, it's a long period of time for a player to be not at his very, very best. And I think we said it earlier on, it's the immediacy of especially what Premier League football is. We want these players at least 9 out of 10 every week, and if that goes on for a month where it's not the case, we ask questions. But it's been such a long period of time where he's not taken hold of games that would be worrying if you're a Spurs fan.
More broadly in that England squad, we can see Chelsea duo Fikayo Tomori and Tammy Abraham. They're both in there. They're both also eligible for Nigeria, and I'm certainly of the opinion that we need to cap them. Cap them now in a competitive fixture. I know Tammy's got a couple in friendlies, and tie them down so they're England players. But England manager Gareth Southgate is maintaining he's not called them up just so he gets an answer on their futures.
I don't think it's ethically right just to give a player a cap to make sure that they can't play for somebody else. The two boys that are in the squad this time, Fick and Tammy, are in on merit. As far as we're concerned, they're born in England. The two boys have been developed through English football. They're English players.
You know what, Gareth? You're absolutely spot on. It would be terribly unethical to cap a player just to tie them down, and you should do it. You should absolutely do it. We should have done it with Wilfried Zaha, who now plays for the Ivory Coast. We need to do it with Wan-Bissaka. Let's not miss a trick. But ultimately, this is up to the players. And let's hear what Tammy Abraham had to say about his international future after scoring for Chelsea against Lille last night.
It's always a privilege, to be wanted by both nations. Like I said, I love both nations, and for me, it's clearly I'm doing something right on the pitch for Chelsea, and I just have to keep going, and my time will come.
Yep, fair enough, Tammy. You get to love both nations, but you've been called up to the England squad. You must have accepted that call-up to be on that list. Do we perhaps have a right, David, as England fans, to demand a bit more commitment, to see those cards on the table now?
It depends what the specifics are of how the player feels about the countries involved, I think. History and heritage, where you feel your background as a part of a family comes from, your loyalty to where that is. I think Gareth's right in the sense of the development that we've seen. They don't owe the system anything because they're very, very good players. The system's helped to enhance them to a point where they are good Premier League players. Careers in their infancy, you've still got to say, in the top flight, and the chance to play for the national side. If you're looking at it purely from a professional point of view, they've got to weigh up where their opportunities are going to go. They've got to back themselves. If he thinks that I back myself to be a top goal scorer in the Premier League, which therein would get me in the national side, which therein gets me in a national side that's capable of making serious inroads into a major tournament, that's where professionally he's got to really weigh this up with the greatest respect to Nigeria and perhaps their approach to what an international tournament would be. And I think you look at the rate that he's started the season, you look at the club that he's playing for, the expectation levels of the club that he's playing for. Yes, it's a slightly different set of circumstances with regard to players coming in and out, but you've got to seize the moment, and he's done that. And I think it would be a great thing for him to be able to lay a marker down, because you're looking at the next generation of English strikers and where they're going to come from, and that name that stands up at this moment in time is Tammy's.
Would it bother you if he was playing for England but he felt Nigerian, say?
How would that manifest itself?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily manifest itself. He would still be performing on the pitch, but he'd be someone thinking, you know what, and I don't know Tammy's view, and I can't begin to presume, but let's say, for the sake of argument, he considers himself Nigerian, but chooses to play for England because he thinks he'd have a greater chance of winning a World Cup. Is that all right by you?
Yeah, I can. I mean, let's this would kind of broaden off into a subject about national identity and what you feel is your relation to watching players play with 3 lions on the shirt and representing the country, which brings out the best and, you've got to say, sometimes the worst in football fans when we have a look at that. But as long as that player's doing all the traditional things that you expect from a club player, working his socks off, looking like he cares about what he's doing, being able to produce for the country that is representing. I don't think we can get too precious about perhaps the motivational aspects of what puts a footballer in the best frame of mind.
Spot on. Well, talking England, former England rugby player James Simpson-Daniel is joining us very shortly to react to Eddie Jones's team selection for Argentina on Saturday.
This is Love Sport.
This Saturday from 8 a.m, join me, Patrick Christys and David Prutton on Love Sport Weekend Breakfast with former England and Lions rugby player Ian Hunter. We'll be with you until noon with all the build-up, updates and analysis of England's battle against old enemy Argentina at the Rugby World Cup. Then next Saturday from 8 a.m, Ewan Thomas, Paul Mortimer and Ian Hunter bring you can't-miss coverage of Le Crunch as England and France face off in a decisive group game. Love Sport Weekend Breakfast Saturday from 8 a.m.
Love Sport.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Hi, my name's Kurt Edwards. I work in advertising and live in Surrey. Last year, the family content insurance was £745. A friend of mine had recommended a spokesmansaid.com. When it came for this year's renewal, I managed to get it for £403. So for those 10 minutes on that website, I saved over £340. Told my family, my friends, you'd be absolutely mad not to give it a go.
thespokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
How are you? How are you really? Modern life can be busy, and sometimes it's easier to look after others before looking after yourself. But there's only one you. And making small changes to your lifestyle now could improve your chances of staying healthier longer. So take the first step to a healthier you with our free How Are You quiz. See how you score and get personalised tips and support. From how to eat a little healthier to turning a 10-minute walk into exercise. Just search One You.
This is Love Sport.
We are talking rugby, a big game coming up for England in the World Cup. They're facing Argentina. A lot of changes for Eddie Jones. But actually, if we go back to the side he played against Tonga, there's only one alteration. But let's hear from Jones now and what he makes, what he's expecting in terms of an Argentine threat.
Yeah, it's going to be a massive test on Saturday. They haven't scrummed against us yet, and we believe our scrum can be a real weapon for us, so hang on to your seats.
We're joined by former England win James Simpson-Daniel. Good afternoon, James. Thank you for joining us. It looks like a lot of changes for England, but if we go back to that Tonga lineup, it's actually only one alteration with Cruz coming in for Laws. Is this our strongest team?
Well, actually, it's a really good point because I think it might look like it's almost, why are we scratching around so much for making so many changes? But the reality is, as far as I'm concerned, is that these lads have played together. He's almost trialled these combinations quite a lot. Bear in mind, England have had 4 pre-World Cup warm-up matches, and then they've also had the 2 group games so far. So they've had a good chunk of games there, 6 games where they've almost had the chance to work out the opportunities of which combinations. Don't forget you've got 2 guys on the bench there coming back from fairly long-term injuries in Vunipola and also Jack Knoll. So he might be featuring, you'd imagine that Vunipola would be his starting prop when he comes 100% right. This is his first game back from injury. I really like his side. I think he's got a really good balance in speed and power. And again, I can't talk to you about the scrum because I wouldn't have a clue about scrums. But if Eddie's excited about the scrums, so be it. But I can't wait for the game personally.
And James, do we look at the England setup and say there's strength in depth there? Because as we keep talking about the tournament aspects of these players being in a very intense period of activity, with the ultimate goal, obviously, of coming back with the trophy, is the squad depth there for you for them to come back with it?
I really think it is. And again, I was at a dinner the other week, and someone said to me, surely going into the World Cup, you should know about 10 of your starting 15 lineup. And I said, that's probably right over previous years, when England managed to win it in 2003 and, and New Zealand have won it previously. You could probably look at those sides and go, you know what, there's a starting 10, and then, the remaining 5 are made up out of the rest of the squad who are quite strong. I think that we're just in a different position this time round. And what I mean by that is we've got some key individuals. I think we've probably got 3 or 4 guys that are very crucial to us that stay fit, that being Vunipola at 8, Farrell obviously at 10 or 12, depending on where they want to play him. Maybe a Toje, you'd say, and Tuolangi in the centre. Now, those are the guys that you want to stay fit. If those guys are fit, we're actually quite blessed with the ability to play a Watson on the wing, but if he wasn't right, you can play Noel or Johnny May or Coconut Singer. Any 4 of those guys, you'd have no issues with starting. But by starting, say, a Coconut Singer on the wing, that opens up the ability to have someone speedy on the other wing or in the centres. Or at fullback. So I really like the way he can mix things around there with his squad, and I'm actually really happy with the strength and depth in our squad. And I think, if anything, let's be realistic. We've got Argentina and France coming up, 2 massive games. Then you're into the quarters, hopefully through to the semis and the final. You're going to pick up injuries in there somewhere, so you'd much rather have that strong squad to be able to rely upon rather than, again, being almost held by your supposed starting 15.
James, you mentioned Owen Farrell there. We're going to see Ford and Farrell starting together against Argentina. This is something that Jones has really toyed with. England were doing it, then they weren't doing it. Now we're doing it again. What's your take? Is it our best setup?
Again, it's really interesting. There's been a lot of back and forth about that combination. And I think people were almost coming into this World Cup thinking, you know what, Farrell is going to be your starting 10. Then it's what he does at the centres. Does he play Tuolangi at 12 or 13? Does he try and get Slade in there? And you couldn't help but watching some of the pre-World Cup matches and also the first couple of games and thinking, you know what, when Ford is in there with Farrell, more doors seem to open up as far as the defensive line's concerned. I just think that their link together is so strong. It was really interesting watching previously when Farrell started at 10. We were doing the bit around the 9, 10, 12 where you'd almost use decoy runners outside the fly half, outside Farrell, and then they'd use passes out the back of that runner. But then what was happening is we were getting stuck in that midfield position where we're trying to target is outside that 13 channel, so the channel a little bit wider, and as soon as you brought Ford onto the pitch and played him with Farrell, it was almost like we found it a lot easier to get into that three-quarter channel. So what that then did is it opened up more width in the attack, and it made it harder to defend, whereas when Farrell was starting at 10 by himself, we were almost getting stuck in that middle part of the field. That's why I think that Jones has gone for the 2 of them together, because they link so well and they're so comfortable playing either 10 or 12, depending on who slots in at first receiver or second receiver.
It's certainly something I like to see, James, and we won't press you on the scrum, as you say, not your area of expertise, but if there's one bit you know about the back 3, you mentioned Jack Nowell already. He's returned from a long time out to be on the bench. If fully fit, would he get into your first 15, and what does he, and what are all the sort of different options there among the 4 players involved on Saturday? What do they offer that's different from each other?
Well, thank you for not putting me on the spot about the front row and the forwards and the scrum. Even though I don't think anyone knows what's going on with the scrums half the time, even
Just
the refs.
pretending, aren't they?
It's a guess, isn't it? It'll be a penalty to one side or the other. But I think regarding the back 3 and Jack Nowell, he's put a lot of faith in Jack Nowell. If you think about it, he's missed all the warm-up matches because of this injury. He was absolutely sensational in the final, the domestic league final against Saracens. And I think in a funny way, that final has made, where he picked up the injury, that's made Eddie's decision for him about, look, this guy is worth waiting for. He's a busy type of player, and what I mean by busy, you can almost remember the way that Chris Ashton plays his game. He'll turn up around scrum half, he'll turn up around the rucks, he'll constantly be offering himself on the inside of the fly half, so he's almost trying to pick off these bigger, slower defenders and use his footwork and speed around there. And the thing is, with Nowell, he's got quite a low centre of gravity and he's very, very powerful, so sometimes you think the tackle's going to be complete on him, but he actually manages to shrug it off and gets over the gain line. I find the combinations, and you find myself saying that a lot, you'll be hearing me say that a lot, the combinations of the back 3 really do fascinate me. You can't go with 3 lightweight guys in the back 3. I think you'll get caught out, especially with the kicking game and the aerial game. But he's got the option there. If he wants, he can start a Cock and a Singer, to use another power-based option with Tuolangi. Then he can throw in your speedsters of Johnny May around that or Anthony Watson. And equally, if you want someone to mix things up and just be a complete busybody because the conditions are going to be slippy, a little bit dewy, and you need someone that's going to almost carry like he's an extra back rower, that's when you play Jack Knoll. And he's got such a good work ethic on him and a strong engine that he's going to make lots of carries throughout the game. So it's a pleasant headache to have for the coaches at England. I think it's fascinating whichever back three he chooses. I just like to see the correct balance in the back three.
James, great to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time. James Simpson-Daniel there, former England wing, giving his take on the Rugby World Cup so far and England's chances. And we're now looking at Manchester United's chances in the Europa League. They're in action tonight against AZ Alkmaar. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has made 8 changes to his starting 11, including a first start for academy left-back Brandon Williams. That team in full. David De Gea captains the side from net. In defence, it's Dalot, Lindelof, Marcus Rojo and Williams. A midfield three of Fred, Matic and Mata. And an exciting young front three. Angel Gomez, academy product, starts. Dan James, the young Welsh winger, starts. And Mason Greenwood, another academy product, starts as well. This is an incredibly exciting lineup for United fans, surely, David?
Yes. Well, it depends what the result is. Let's be honest. It'll either be it was a masterstroke to chuck young lads in, see what we could get from them, or it could be it's cobbled a lot of players together he doesn't really fancy in the Premier League. Depending on how the game turns out, he's very quickly got a preemptive excuse in with regards to the pitch, which, to all intents and purposes, we were discussing before, is as good as a hockey pitch. A sixth form standard playing surface, which doesn't really help with their ability to play the kind of football that they want to play. But I think if you're looking towards the extended future of what Manchester United will hopefully be, then these younger players that get the chance are going to be the future.
Absolutely crucial for them. Let's hear what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had to say about that playing surface.
I'm surprised that they've chosen to play on this pitch when they had to. When I've looked at it, because it's not the best I've seen. It's one of the worst ones I've seen for a long while.
David, have you ever played on an artificial pitch like that?
Only in training, maybe in a friendly. I never really got on with them too well. I mean, they were very kind of high tech, and it was 3-4G type stuff, the little rubberized
that go everywhere.
They do go everywhere.
Find one in the kettle.
You do sliding tackle, and I mean they're disappearing to all kinds of places. You're forever washing them out.
Sliding tackle, was it?
Well, and then you get that little kind of. You didn't get the horrendous grass burn or the artificial burns that you would have got in the first round of stuff like that I played on when I was a kid. But I couldn't really get on with them. My control of a football was never good enough to be able to adapt to different surfaces.
Don't do yourself down. That is not true.
No, but seriously, Johnny, seriously, that's not self-deprecating. That's just brutal honesty. And I just couldn't understand it. I never thought the bounce of the ball was as true as it was on actual grass. But I think a lot of them now, obviously this is a different entity entirely, but a lot of them now, especially in the Premier League, they're all kind of hybrid pitches out there with a bit of real stuff and a bit of fake stuff to kind of make sure that it's a good playing surface over the course of a season. But I just think the thing with this is it's probably been asked about the pitch, hasn't he? He's not. But if he's ventured that forth without too much prodding, then it always seems to me that, as I said, you're future-proofing what the reaction to a poor result might be.
Yeah, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer not happy with the way the pitch looks. Remember, or if you haven't heard why they're playing on this pitch, this is why it's great. I love this. AZ Alkmaar playing 45 miles or so south of where they normally play. What happened was, I think back in the summer, a bit of the roof of the stadium collapsed. Too many solar panels on the roof, weighed it down too much, the roof collapsed, they're now having to play on a rubbish artificial hockey pitch. So, I don't know. Look, Extinction Rebellion, I'm sure they got a lot going for them, but they're also causing probably a lot of extra emissions by people having to travel 50 miles down the road to play a game of football somewhere else because there were too many solar panels put on the roof of the stadium. How about that?
At least no one sprayed any fake blood on it. Greta Thunberg, eat your heart out. Man United and Wolves, of course, kick off their Europa League games at 5:55. We'll have updates on those fixtures for you once they get underway, all the way up until 7. And we're talking a bit more Sebco next.
Love Sport Radio, the station giving fans a voice.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Can you save money on your energy bills? Tony did, with help from a spokesman said.com. Getting people real savings.
I'm Tony from Northampton. My bills for gas and electricity had gone straight through the roof. I chose a spokesman said, and they saved me £2,800. It was so easy, I used them for my house and contents insurance too.
For help saving money on your energy bills, go to a spokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money. If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do, the smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. This means that travelling to the EU will change. You'll need to check online if your passport is valid for travel to Europe. If you're planning on driving, you'll need to check if you have the right documents to drive. And make sure your travel insurance covers all your healthcare needs. To keep your trip on track, check what you need to do at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
I like Putin. He gets me. I like Trump. I've got him.
Love sport. Lord Coe is a man who likes his own voice, he likes headlines, and he doesn't like Gabby Logan. He's been giving it quite large this week, in a week where there have been question marks raised about, should we say, the propriety of some athletic activity. Is this a point, Guy Watts, where Lord Coe should start giving it massive?
No, it's not, Johnny. You've probably seen these comments by now. We spoke about them earlier on, of course, on yesterday's show too, when they broke. He basically said it's very easy to sit there and make all sorts of Gabby Logan-type judgments over 3 or 4 days and clear off back to match of the day, in reference to the way that the BBC, among many other media outlets, of course, have covered the current Athletics World Championships. They dared to talk about the fact that there were thousands and thousands of empty seats at what is meant to be the biggest event for athletics on the planet outside the Olympics. How shocking, how terrible of them to do so. So I don't think the kids in glass houses are traditionally told to throw stones, but clearly Seb Coe has a different advisor to the one I grew up with. But Seb Coe, not advisable in that sense, but I think as well what it's given us a chance to do is maybe have a little bit of a think, and we'll talk to Rob Harris, who's really big on this stuff, a little bit more about this after 5, but a little bit of a dig down into Seb Coe, the man, and the individual that he is that runs the World Athletics Federation, the IAAF. And, there's a couple of other things that have surfaced or resurfaced, if you like, in the last few days, vaguely linking to the whole Alberto Salazar ban, his links with the Nike Oregon project, and Nike as a whole and their influence, if you like, within athletics. And a reminder, I suppose, I'm not calling for his head here or whatever, and even if I was, I don't think he'd take much notice. But if you remember, back in August 2015, he took over as president of the IAAF. He'd been a vice president for several years before that, under, by the way, what's been proven to be a very corrupt reign of Lamine Diack. On the 26th of November 2015, so around 4 years ago, or almost exactly 4 years ago, he stepped down finally, months into his time as president of the IAAF, from his role as a Nike ambassador, which he'd had for a few years previously. He'd had some sort of association with Nike going all the way back to the late 1970s that paid him, we believe at the time, in excess of £100,000 a year. It was sort of suggested that it would be some sort of conflict of interest, that as the head of the global body for the sport, having such a close, not to mention financially lucrative partnership with, let's be honest, the leading manufacturer and provider for kit and equipment in the sport would be in some way a conflict of interest. He refused to acknowledge this. Even when he relinquished the partnership, the ambassador role, he said, it's purely because of the noise that there is around me having this, not because I actually think I shouldn't have the role. So, a lack of self-awareness there. And remember, in the last few months of the Lamine Diack presidency, when Seb Coe, of course, was still an ambassador for Nike, it was awarded, the 2021 World Athletics Championships were awarded to Eugene, which is in Oregon in Northwest America, which is essentially the home of Nike. It was awarded without a vote, and that was, of course, primarily Lamine Diack's decision. But there was always a little bit of sort of whispering around whether or not Seb Coe had maybe spoken to the bid and suggested they do this or that. He insists he never lobbied on their behalf. But I suppose what I'm saying is when this guy, Seb Coe, when he chooses to speak out like this, not only is he missing the mark massively by failing to acknowledge the severe problems in his own sport, the fact that it was a bad choice of venue to go to Doha, and to fail to even attempt to spin it better than he might have otherwise been able to. But he's got to be careful because there's possibly one or two things in his own past that he wouldn't want particularly dragged up. And remember, things always get dragged up when your name kind of is tainted in some way. So yeah, I thought they were pretty surprising comments, and as I say, we'll get Rob's thoughts on it all after 5 o'clock. But fair to say that Seb Coe's probably not best happy. Lord Coe, of course, not best happy with the BBC overall. Remember, Michael Johnson, the athletics legend and BBC pundit, caught when he thought he was off air a couple of days ago, describing Seb Coe as being full of something that I can't repeat, but it's a 4-letter word beginning with S.
It really bothers me, and I completely recognise that it bothers me because it is my job and I sometimes work for the BBC, but it's not just a BBC thing. It distresses me on a fundamental level when you get people like Lord Coe slagging off broadcasters or journalists for doing their job. In the same way it bothers me when you get members of the public suggesting that journalists have an agenda or in some ways enemies of the people, be it on sporting matters, political matters. The journalists in question are doing their job. They have to be allowed to do their job. And by virtue of doing their job, they actually do quite a lot of good. Gabby Logan's literal role is to ask questions, right? She's got to ask the obvious questions. And these are the obvious questions because it's not like Gabby is doing big investigative
the BBC setup, right? It is literally part of the stadium. They are looking over their shoulder. They are looking at the crowd. So all they have to do, all you have to do, is look at the screen and see all the empty seats because they're right there. And he says she's making judgments. She's not the one making judgments, as I pointed out earlier. It's the pundits who are giving opinions. She's asking questions. I think it's ludicrous. David, you of course do a bit of anchoring yourself and broadcasting. Do you ever get people coming up to you accusing you of bias and that kind of thing? Because people love to on the echo chamber that's Twitter.
Well, they do. I mean, especially in the sense of when you're talking about whatever game you're doing in specific teams and anything that the slightly more precious element of a fan base can take and twist and get jittery about would get taken that particular way. I think you soon learn to realise that whatever you're going to say will offend somebody, will get on someone's nerves somewhere. I mean, just in this room, I can sense by the looks on both of your faces that happens quite a lot of the space of 4 hours. But it just
found one fan base to be particularly sensitive.
No, I'd try and offend them all.
All right,
make sure that
that's balanced.
Take a scorched earth approach to it all. but like I say, with this, it's bizarre because you've got the head of a huge international organisation coming across as petty, coming across as very touchy, coming across as a bit paranoid about what people are saying. And surely, if you're in charge of something, I'm not saying you've got to be completely rhino-skinned and bat everything off, but you've got to. It kind of goes with the role. You've got to go, okay, you've said that. That's okay. I'll take on board what you're saying and I'll answer it in this way. And the tone at which he's answered it as well. It's not just the words. It's done in a. We said before we came on air. I mean, it on the one hand, it's a very backhanded compliment about where he sees females in sports presented. Go back to match of the day. I mean, like Jeffrey
Go back to football, love.
Go back to football. I was like, oh well, we've come far. We've come a certain way, which is fantastic. But it's said in a detrimental way. But and I don't. And sometimes you've got to look at the personnel involved. Michael Johnson, highly regarded, highly respected, highly successful. I've not come across too many people that don't like Gabby Logan or the way she goes about her job. So for him to go, right, Logan, I'm coming for you, and goes, what? Gabby Logan's got upset. What on earth happened?
And really spiteful comments as well from Lord Coe, remember, about athletes speaking out against it, because some of them have also dared to suggest that the World Championships might have taken place with more than 7 people watching who aren't paid to be there. And he said, well, I think you'll find it's largely the athletes who are going home without a medal. Mate, that's literally, horrible, I remember stuff like that in the playground. It is so petty as to be unbelievable. And the point is as well, I think that for a lot of us, people older than me will remember him as a brilliant athlete, of course, a gold medal winner at Olympics and World Championships for Great Britain back in the day, and he's done fantastic things for this country and for athletics and everything since then. Of course, played a massive role in London 2012 and everything. And I can't help but feel, while he is doing some good things, some people think he's taken a strong stance on Russia and their doping problems and everything. I can't help but feel he's doing a lot of it. You can undo so much so quickly with badly chosen words, and I feel like those ones yesterday were particularly badly chosen.
I agree, and in the context of what he was saying, the thing that annoyed me more than anything else is we're on a journey. because the subtext of we're on a journey is I get it. I've got a vision that you don't understand, and you athletes who are complaining, you're only complaining because you're not as good athletes as I was, and Gabby Logan and people like you who question me, you're only doing it because you're not as clever as I am. Wind your neck in. You're not doing anything brilliant. You are taking entirely properly, but you are taking large amounts of money to put sporting events in situations where it is very difficult to properly enact them, and then you're getting angry when people ask questions about it. I don't know what you expect.
This is Love Sport.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. This means that travelling to the EU will change. You'll need to check online if your passport is valid for travel to Europe. If you're planning on driving, you'll need to check if you have the right documents to drive. And make sure your travel insurance covers all your healthcare needs. To keep your trip on track, check what you need to do at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Before you set off on a long journey, remember to check your vehicle. Are your tyres correctly inflated? And are the treads deep enough? Have you got enough fuel? Is your oil level right? Checking your vehicle doesn't take long, but can prevent a breakdown or accident and save you money. So, before you set off on a long journey, check your tyres, fuel and oil. Highways England, connecting the country.
Lots to come on Posh Boys on Drive, not least the chance to win a signed retro Manchester United shirt signed by none other than Teddy Sheringham. All you've got to do is follow us at Love Sport Radio on Twitter, retweet that tweet, and you'll be in with a chance of winning something absolutely brilliant. For the next hour, we're going to be talking in part of it to Rob Harris, who is global sports correspondent for AP. He's a real expert on the current situation in athletics. He's out in Doha. He'll be giving us his take on Dina Asher-Smith, on those Salazar bans, but also, of course, Seb Coe. A journalistic view. How does it feel to be challenged by someone who has absolutely no idea about what your job entails? We'll also be asking Ronan Murphy, German football expert, about the Red Bull franchises. But before that, it's time for all your latest headlines.
On digital radio, online, mobile and smart speaker. This is Love Sport News.
From the Sky News Centre at 5, a police admin worker armed with a knife has killed 4 colleagues at the force's headquarters in Paris. The attacker was shot dead at the scene after it happened at around 1 p.m. local time. Our correspondent Lisa Holland says it's being treated as a murder investigation, but there were major initial concerns.
This is a city which is sadly very familiar with dealing with terrorist incidents, so that of course would be the sort of first line of inquiry, the first concern amongst the police, but also government officials as well, thinking are they or are they not handling any kind of major terrorist incident.
Boris Johnson's Brexit offer is facing some resistance from EU leaders. European Council President Donald Tusk says he's unconvinced by the plans, while Irish PM Leo Varadkar says they fall short in a number of areas. The Royal London Hospital says it's considering the implications of a High Court ruling that gave the parents of a seriously ill 5-year-old permission to take her to Italy. Doctors had argued continuing Tafiga Rakib's life support was futile. An ex-special effects worker on the Lord of the Rings movies has admitted murdering his elderly parents in a row over a pet dog. Sergei Kudryavtsev, who's 48, stabbed the pair to death in their West London home in May. Around 5,000 jobs are potentially on offer for people affected by the collapse of Thomas Cook. A recruitment event's being held at Manchester Airport today. It's estimated a third of the 9,000 made redundant were from the area. Former flight attendant Sharon Rawson says it's been a real confidence boost for her.
There's jobs out there that we didn't even think were available, and then there are people pulling together and saying, you could actually do this when you don't think, I've been doing cabin crew since I was 19. I don't really think I've got any skills apart from chicken and beef.
And in sport, tonight's Europa League football gets underway later this hour. Manchester United are in the Netherlands to face AZ Alkmaar. Wolves are away to Turkey's Besiktas, and Rangers are at Swiss side Young Boys. That's the latest. I'm Kit Bradshaw.
Love Sport Radio. On digital radio, online, mobile and smart speaker.
This is the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive.
Good afternoon, it's the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. You're with me, Johnny Burrow, Guy Watts and special guest David Prutton, former Leeds and Forest midfielder. We're with you till 7 and our top stories this afternoon. We're reacting to Gareth Southgate's England squad, some big omissions in there, not least Dele Alli. Dina Asher-Smith made history last night with a 200-metre gold in the World Championships. What an achievement. And we're going to be looking at the fallout from Alberto Salazar's 4-year athletic ban for doping. Keep in mind, he is Sir Mo Farah's former coach. And we're also talking a bit of Lord Coe. But first of all, David, let's talk England. An exciting squad, a young squad. You're clearly well behind it.
Yes.
But which
Buzzing.
omission most catches your eye?
It's the Walker one for me, once again. It was kind of put into the reasoning for the first omission, really, wasn't it? You mentioned it earlier, Johnny, about it, the ability to look at other players in that position.
With the proviso that he would come back into that squad.
29 years old, I think he is. By no means anywhere near finished. He's a very talented footballer, of course. Back-to-back Premier League titles, done very well since he's moved to Manchester City. More than justified the fact that he came away from Tottenham. And I think consistently, yes, there are young players fighting for that position, but to not even have him in the squad, it's a funny one for me, because he quite obviously wants to build a young team that can stay together for quite a long period of time, Gareth, and get through the journey, which we hate that word, together. But someone who's experienced tournament football, experienced qualification, and he's been at the very sharp end of what the Premier League is, and has started the season well, I couldn't really understand that one.
And there's got to be a balance, hasn't there, with that young squad? I love seeing Mount in there. I love seeing Tomori. I love seeing Abraham. I love seeing Jadon Sancho. But it is not Football Manager. It's not FIFA. You can't throw a load of kids in and expect them to win a European Championship. You do need some experience. And as you say, when we're looking at 29-year-old Kyle Walker, 48 caps, just a couple of them sprinkled around the squad. I'm not even saying he has to play, but you'd have him there, wouldn't you? Just to say, lads, here's how you do it.
Well, you absolutely would. And the impression that you get off Kyle Walker as a teammate, he seems to be very well liked, very well respected. The respect comes there because of his ability, of what he's won. There's an instant respect I'm sure he'll command over the rest of the squad. And his ability to be a good tourist, a good teammate, a good part of the group. Again, I'm not saying that Gareth needs to take people along just purely for the ride as passengers, just to kind of make sure that the social side of it goes off without a hitch and there's no fractions within the group. But it's just a strange omission for me. I mean, we're in a position where the competition for place is exactly what Gareth wants and exactly what's needed to keep each and every player honest. It just seems a bit of a strange one when he plays for. One of, if not the best team in European football, but can't get into his national squad.
We've got this question now of Tammy Abraham, who has England caps, isn't tied to England because they didn't come in a competitive fixture, and he's hedging. If we're honest, he's in the England squad again, but he's saying, listen, I really like England, I really like Nigeria. Fair enough. We heard from Gareth Southgate earlier in the show saying he feels it would be unethical to cap him just to tie him to England. I'm of the opinion that I don't really care, and I want to tie him to England, and that may well be unethical, but so what? What's your take?
Well, I think if it certainly lays down or throws the gauntlet down, doesn't it? Prove to us that you are going to be the man that's going to lead the line for your national side for the foreseeable future. Carry on your sterling work that you've done within the Chelsea team at the start of this Premier League season, and then show us what you're made of over the course of several years. Like we've seen with Harry Kane, obviously there was no debate there about the international side that he was ever going to play for. But I can see, well, Gareth wants players that want to be there, doesn't he? He wants to pick players that are going to come and show the commitment to the cause and the country and be able to perform. And I think he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't just cap a player to box them off from anyone else. He'd cap a player because he think it would be good enough and beneficial for England. That's got to be the first port of call for the manager.
It absolutely does. Another of our top stories this evening is the Athletics, and specifically IAAF President Lord Coe, who has really gone for the BBC in the last couple of days. We're fortunate to be joined on the line by Rob Harris, who is global sports correspondent for AP. Rob is out in Doha. Good evening, Rob. Thank you for joining us. What was your instinctive reaction when you saw Seb Coe not only have a pop at the BBC, but Gabby Logan in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty surprising the fact he'd decided to criticise Gabby Logan that way, given the fact that Gabby's obviously a regular presenter of athletics, the Diamond League on BBC, and the fact he's basically suggesting she should go back to Match of the Day. I mean, that's very much just one of her sports presenting roles, and she's actually someone in the sports broadcasting world who's across many sports. So it's interesting that he chose to personalise it in such a way when actually all Gabby was doing was pointing out the very legitimate issue, the fact there are empty seats in the stadium, and she was questioning pundits on that. She was also questioning them on the doping scandal, the Alberto Salazar case, which perhaps Seb Coe and the IAAF would prefer to divert attention away from.
It's worth noting as well that Gabby Logan is, of course, herself a former international athlete. She is qualified to comment on these issues to the same extent he is, as I see it. And in fighting back against his critics so aggressively, has he actually ended up bringing a bit more scrutiny on himself and that decision to host these World Championships in Doha?
Yeah, on the very basic level, the issue around the empty seats was it was a story that had been dominating the first few days of the championship, but as with many stories, you can't just keep on repeating the same issue. Once we've highlighted the empty seats, once we've spoken to or tried to the organisers, once they've presented that. But the story sort of fades away to some degree. But what Seb Coe did by speaking about the coverage of the controversy is the fact it added fuel to the flame. It gave new life to the story and a new focus on the very questions over Qatar's suitability to host the championships in terms of the local interest. And then, you've seen on television the sways of empty seats at times, the seats that are covered with branding because they're unoccupied. What the organisers are saying is the fact, some people aren't turning up, or some are leaving after the particular event they're interested in, and they're actually trying to repopulate the stadium. But whichever way you look at it, it doesn't look good around the world.
He can get upset about questions being asked, but to my mind, he and key figures at UK Athletics as well are quite fortunate they're not facing more questions, more heat over their close ties to both Nike and, of course, Alberto Salazar more obliquely. Are you surprised that there hasn't been a little more probing on that front?
Well, I mean, opportunities have been limited to some degree in recent days, the chance to actually fully go in depth on some of these issues. Sebastian will be delivering the spec test before the end of the championships, which will obviously mean the Nike issue is bound to come up again, because if we think back to when he was first elected IAAF president in 2015, he had this ambassadorship with Nike, and he tried to actually keep it. It was only under the mounting pressure that he relinquished it, because obviously the obvious conflicts of interest that entailed. But yeah, he had Salazar's, doping as he was trying to flout the rules, and it does leave certainly questions around the involvement of Nike and around particularly there have been issuing statements and they have been sort of denying any knowledge that around doping, the point to failed tests, etc. But however it stands, the fact that Salazar is now banned from the sport for 4 years, and of course there are questions around UK athletic involvement with Salazar too.
Rob, I mean, when we break down, obviously, these comments that he's made, the kind of past history with Nike and his role at the very summit of the kind of regulatory side of what athletics is, we were speaking earlier on the show, and Johnny mentioned about Sebco talking about a journey that this is on. I mean, in the broader context of what he's doing in that position, are we looking at a man that's been a force for change, been a force for good in that instance?
I mean, if we look back to when he was elected in 2015, there are many questions when it reached Parliament with the DCMS hearings over just what he knew about the Russian doping scandals and when. Did he pay enough attention to early allegations? Was he curious enough, even down to the detail? Did he open emails? He has turned it around in the sense that as the evidence mounted against Russia, he did boot them out with the agreement of his council from athletics. So he took this hard stance in terms of banning Russia. That wasn't adopted by many other sports, like FIFA has not punished Russia over the football involvement in the mass doping scheme, exposed in part by the whistleblower Rodchenkov.
Rob,
but what
sorry, carry on.
Coe was obviously re-elected last week for another 4-year term. He actually said he wanted to sort of now move on from the doping issues to bring fun back to the sport. But I mean, it's very hard to because of allegations around Kenya and other countries. And it was a point I made to him last week, actually, whether he needs to start addressing other countries too.
Rob, a complex scenario. Thank you for giving us a bit of clarity on it, and lovely to speak to you again as well. We really appreciate your time. Rob Harris there, who is global sports correspondent for AP. David Prutton, talking as a former top draw footballer, how would it affect you to play
doping? I'd have been miles better.
I'd have been class size of my arms. No, when we're looking at these championships in Qatar and of course a World Cup coming up, we're looking at 90% humidity, incredible temperatures well above 30 degrees Celsius. How much harder is it to play in those kind of conditions?
It would have been extremely tough. You've got to look at my formative years of playing football up in Yorkshire. Were chucking it down for the majority of the season, very cold, run around to stay warm, cut up to your knees in mud, etc., etc. You get the odd balmy summer when you could play with your mates. It was all a bit nicer. But I mean, the heat, the humidity, that very essence of stepping out onto a pitch and just being caked in sweat before any form of real kind of intense physical activity has occurred, it almost makes me worried about it, thinking about it now. It's like I can look at a football pitch now and just feel tired because I spent a lot of time running around being tired. But it's extremely tough with what we're watching over there. We spoke about the marathon runners. I mean, a marathon in itself is quite obviously a ridiculously long way to run competitively, but in those conditions, and the thing that I throw forward with, if you're talking about a team sport such as football, yes, you've got to be physically capable of getting around the pitch, but you've still got to make thousands of decisions over the course of a game with regard to what you're going to do with the ball. Am I in the right place, formation-wise? Am I doing the right thing? And then you've got 11 other players that are trying to do exactly the same thing to stop you being as good as you possibly can. So when you're already kind of disorientated by the fact that the humidity is eating into you, then I would say it would be extremely tough. The only real kind of comparison I can use, when I was at Nottingham Forest, we went to Miami for a pre-season trip.
Must have been hard for you.
It was, I mean, a block back from South Beach. Oh, it was awful. but it was ridiculously warm and humid. So it'd rain non-stop for an hour, bucket it down. You go out and do some training. Steam coming off the pitch, steam coming off the top of your head because it was just insane, really. And it would have been a really tough way for a football team to be able to go about a season, to be able to operate in those conditions. But I mean, there's that acclimatisation perhaps you might feel, but for a Yorkshireman in hot weather, we don't do too well.
Oh, aye. Must be very tough indeed.
Want to know how I change a light bulb? I hold the bulb and I wait for the world to revolve around me.
Love sport.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. Brexit will bring changes that affect businesses in many ways, particularly if you buy from EU suppliers, sell to EU customers, provide services to EU clients, and receive customer data from other businesses in the EU. Businesses need to prepare. Find out how at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
I'm Leslie from North Essex. I couldn't believe that after 5 minutes I'd saved over £900 on my energy bills. When my car insurance was then due for renewal, I went back to a spokesman said and reduced my premium by over £500. I thought that my home insurance was expensive. When I shopped around on a spokesman said, I saved a staggering £1,100. I've saved £2,500. I cannot believe it was that easy.
A spokesmansaid.com, fighting for you, saving you money. If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do, the smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
If you see somebody showing any of the signs of a stroke, you don't have to think about it, you just dial 999. Use the FAST test. F. Face. Has their face fallen on one side? Can they smile? A. Arms. Can they raise both arms and keep them there? S. Speech. Is their speech slurred? T. Time. Time to call 999 if you see any one of these signs. Act fast, make the call, dial 999.
This is Love Sport.
If you can fill the unforgiving minutes with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Yours is the earth. Well, David Prutton has got himself in a bit of trouble with the powers that be at Love Sport Radio. The reason why you heard that is because it is, of course, National Poetry Day. Now, Guy and I, as good students of English literature, have turned up in both glasses and roll-neck jumpers to get as close to either a poet or Jean-Paul Sartre as we can. Mr. Prutton,
The fashion designer, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. I find it bizarre to even try and link poetry and sport, but for either of you two, are these things that go together?
I wouldn't ask David Prutton about poetry having played for Leeds, Nottingham Forest.
I reckon. No, I'm not even joking here. I reckon Prutton's got a bit in his back pocket.
Do you reckon?
Prutton's poetry.
Prutton's poetry corner.
Prutton's back pocket poetry.
Yes, that's got all kinds of connotations, hasn't it? I enjoyed poetry at school. I was a big fan of English and the written word. It was always something that fascinated me. I was always better with interpretive stuff, not the actual brass tacks of maths. That's the answer. Science. That's the answer. Everything that was to do with your interpretation. Basically, whatever gave you a platform to stand up in a classroom and listen to the sound of your own voice. I thoroughly enjoyed
that.
Who'd have thunk it, eh?
Who's your favourite poet then?
Well, you got me thinking about this on the way in. And and one stood out for me only because it's a very recent one that I stumbled across in a YouTube wormhole, as we've all been there several hours into doing sod all on a day when you've got nothing to do, and it was a Johnny Vegas poem that he wrote on 8 out of 10 Cats.
Great mind
about drinking.
Okay,
it's a phenomenal. In the structure of this, obviously Jimmy Carr's is the kind of he's obviously the host panel running things, and they've had to come up with a bit of poetry in a relatively short space of time. He reads this, and it's a very melancholic, bleak view of the kind of lone drinker at the bar, what he brings to the kind of caricatures that are in this bar, and what he takes away with him when he eventually leaves by himself. Well, it's a beautiful piece of
genuinely good, isn't it?
It's fantastic.
Last Orders, and it goes as follows.
It's readable on air, is it?
It absolutely is.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Ask not for whom that bell doth toll, as wordy barmaids' eyes do roll. A landlord with an earnest shout calls time on drinks and ushers out the dutiful sip up and leave, but he's a last card up his sleeve, with feet like landlocked deep-sea deep-sea diver shuffles barwards with a fiver. He begs at last for just one more, and one yourself, just make it right. He promises to drink it quick, yet deep down he knows he's feeling sick. Not from stout or bags of scratchings, more from questions booze keeps asking. What happened to the Happy Meat? David, this is awful. I think, no, hang on. I need to pee. In the bog the poet sways, poised to ponder fonder days, before the time of cheap warm cider. Eyes of wonder opening wider, now they narrow, tired of fun, as fart turns wet and burns the bum. Yet rarest smile pops in his head, till urine runs down inside leg. And thus the landlord shows him out, the child inside is crying out, I was not meant for such sweet sorrow, but opts instead for see you tomorrow. Though stout-soaked, sig-stained, feckless soul is what for, not who, that bell did toll. It is good.
He did not come up with that, though, on 8 out of 10 cans.
And also, there's quite a lot of quite highbrow literary reference in there.
Yeah, the sweet sorrow one, that's Shakespeare, isn't it?
Got so many depths, you say.
Yeah, wow.
That is quite a poem to pull out your back pocket.
I don't believe that Johnny Vegas wrote it. I don't believe that he wrote it on that show.
I don't think he did it in the moment, but I don't see why he wouldn't be capable.
No, it was quite good. I got someone with the other day, Brian Bilston. I think is that it's a fake person. I think it's like a parody account that does joke poems that was quite good. That I thought people might enjoy. It's called "I Started Early, Got Brexit Done." Sorted out the Middle East, walked the dog, achieved world peace, put 2 loads of laundry on, got a bit of Brexit done. Popped down to the driving range, improved my swing, stopped climate change, took a break at 1:10, got a bit more Brexit done. Made some tea, put up a shelf, reversed the trends in mental health, cured cancer just for fun, finished getting Brexit done. Very topical, I thought.
Very topical.
Johnny, is that something more traditional for you?
I find it really hard. I think probably my favourite poem or set of poems is the Lucy poems by Wordsworth. But I quite like a longer poem.
Right.
Well.
No, Johnny, we're out of time, I'm afraid.
We are. You don't want to hear it.
How long are you talking? Paradise Lost?
Paradise Lost I am a fan of. I won't lie. Fairy Queen is too long. Paradise Lost I will mess about with.
What do you like about it, then?
What do I like about it? You've put me on the spot there. I think it's the way he can use both words and rhythm to make a point, and he can mirror or clash what he's actually saying with how it sounds to make you feel a certain way.
Does that make I mean you could do parallels with songwriting there as well, couldn't you? About how you could read a set of lyrics and you hear the music and go, how on earth have you put that to that, and where does that come together? And then it becomes very much, and it's more obviously relevant to poetry because it's written and you read it. It's the words tell you something and the music makes you feel something, and so for good poetry that does both things, I think.
Well, look at our last Nobel Prize for Literature winner, a certain Mr. Bob Dylan, the greatest songwriter of all time to my mind.
Was he the last person to get a Nobel? Because that was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Is it not every year?
I think
they just give it out when there's an
not be the last one.
But he did get one. You're quite right, Johnny. Yeah,
he's an extraordinary guy.
Having terrible flashbacks here to. Yeah, like
uni
tutorials. Yeah, it's absolutely bizarre.
Imagine that if you walked in, it was just David Prutton. Go, so why do you like Paradise Lost? Hang on a minute.
I said specifically not Radio 4. What on earth is this? Yeah, well, Liverpool fans have a song, don't they? Poetry, emotion, tra-la-la-la-la, which I suppose at times on the Jurgen Klopp you could sort of argue is what you see. Not so much from... We are going to move on, I'm afraid. If you do have a favourite sporting poem, though, get in touch. I was trying to think of sporting poetry, and short of Mike Bassett reading If, which of course we had a little bit of at the start. There's not an awful lot. There's the cricket one, Vitae Lampada. There's a Deathly Hush in the close tonight, 10 to make and the match to win, and it goes on. I don't know the rest of it, but I know those first 2 lines. That's a little bit about cricket and other stuff as well. It's apparently got meaning and symbolism and stuff. Can't remember what that is though. And there aren't that many other sporting poems that I can think of, but if we've forgotten any, let us know. Send us a WhatsApp on 0208 70 20 558, or send us one of your own. Johnny Burrow was coming up with a couple of quite funny ones earlier, I have to say, Johnny, although they weren't...
Was it more limerick based, was it?
They were slightly,
and also spectacularly libelous.
Once was a man from Love Sport.
Yeah, keep going.
Fill in the blanks, guy.
Yeah, there we go. See what we can come up with before the end of the show. About half an hour, Johnny, until Man United kick off on a plastic pitch in Holland, a place where they shouldn't be playing, but they are, because AZ Alkmaar Stadium fell in because they put too many solar panels on the roof.
Yeah, a plastic pitch for plastic supporters, guys. Shall we have have a quick reminder.
I've only been to Old Trafford once.
Let's have a quick reminder
It's too
of
expensive
that
now,
team news. It is, to be fair. De Gea in net, a back four of Dalot, Lindelof, Marcus Rojo and Williams. A first start for him, the academy left back. Midfield three of Fred, Matic, Mata, and a front three, two of which also academy graduates, Angel Gomez and Greenwood, joined by Dan James up front. I quite like the look of that side.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, given that United have gone almost second string there, you do look at those names and think, well, obviously, I'm a fan, I should know them, but I think most people would recognise those names and go, well, they are at least on the kind of fringe of the first team. You've got a couple of exciting youngsters, a couple of players in the case of like a Matic, who a couple of years ago, was still considered quite a decent player. Maybe he's fallen off a little bit now, but I'd hope we'd have enough to get past AZ Alkmaar. The Europa League, I wouldn't have thought was a priority for United this season, but I think at a time where morale is low, with 9 points from 7 in the league, I don't think a win in any competition, however it may come, would be a bad thing. Obviously got off to a winning start against Astana just at home, 2 weeks ago, so it'd be nice to get a little bit of momentum going in that, and obviously the more wins you get early on, the more changes you can make a little bit later in the group stage. The big story though this afternoon really is the England squad, of course, and I think what we've seen today, if you've missed it, the headlines, if you like, are a few notable omissions. Dele Alli, Jesse Lingard, of course, the two players in that midfield three at the World Cup when we reached the semi-finals, which is still only 15-16 months ago, and also Kyle Walker, who was left out of the last squad. You guys spoke about him just a minute ago, and we'll come on to Dele Alli and Jesse Lingard in a moment, but a few inclusions as well. We've had the likes of Tammy Abraham and Fikayo Tomori get call-ups, which is significant, of course, potentially ties them to England rather than Nigeria, who they're also allowed to represent. But yeah, I thought it was worth, not specifically with any of those players, but Gareth Southgate is a manager clearly who, in fairness, hasn't ever, it seems, been afraid of dropping people. He got rid of Joe Hart and Wayne Rooney pretty early on in his time as manager. It's quite reassuring, isn't it, to see that he's not scared of dropping however big a name you might be, however much you've done for him in the past? Or do you think he should have showed them a bit more loyalty, given what the likes of Lingard and Ali have done for him?
Well, I mean, it's an overused word, isn't it, in football, loyalty. I think he's got to pick whoever is in the right frame of form at the specific time. That's why, for me, the kind of Kyle Walker one is a bit of an anomaly. But he's got to be constantly thinking on his feet, Gareth. He'll see every single player, he'll see every single situation, maybe question marks about the kind of fitness that these players are in, whether a player of 29 might need a little smidgen of a rest, which is an elite athlete, and he would be just good to have around anyway. And like I said to Johnny before, it's not about just having good lads around, but he'd make a tangible difference to what that team is like on the pitch. So, I mean, and with the Lingard one, it's funny times for them all at Manchester United. Same with Dele Alli with Tottenham. And
are they really in worse form than, say, Fabian Delph or, say, Ross Barkley?
Yeah, I suppose the Delph one was perhaps slightly, maybe with getting Fabian Delph in, there is the element of him being loyal to a trusted lieutenant, perhaps. And with Ross Barkley, again, a player that we know is very, very good, but I still think he should do more in a football match. I think technically you're looking at a very talented player, but those early comparisons with Gaza were just so way off the mark.
Well, he's the one that stood out for me in terms of inclusions in this squad, and the one I wanted to bring up, because David, I agree with you completely. If you look at him in a vacuum, he's a fantastic football player. He's got that technique, he's got the vision, he does everything 5 seconds too slowly, and for me, he's not going to get there. We had Ross Barkley, the exciting talent, for a long time. Now, I hate to say it, we're dealing with Ross Barkley, the average footballer.
Does anyone else think that Ross Barkley has kind of come into a bracket a little bit with maybe Lingard and Ali as well, and maybe in turn within the next year or two, Barkley will make way? But the point was, at one stage or another, all these kids, with maybe the exception of Lingard, who didn't come through till a little bit later, but Jack Wilshere as well, you could throw his name into that mix. They were all heralded as either England's saviour or part of an exciting crop. And yes, you could say that they're being replaced now by an even more exciting crop. Or could you say that Maddison, Mount and all the rest of them, because they're all getting compared to whether it's Gaza or Scholes or someone else, these comparisons, well, they're saying comparisons are odious, but we talked earlier, Mauricio Pochettino calling Dele Alli best 21-year-old in the world. We all said Barkley's the new Gaza. Well, neither of them have lived up to anything like that sort of promise, and we're talking in the recent past in those instances. So is it an English thing? I don't know. It is often accused. We're often accused of that.
It's not an English thing. As a 15-year-old lad, I was not being compared to Gaza.
I was going to say, I don't remember your match of the day.
I was starting to think about sports journalism, and I started a football blog called The New Zidane, because the new Zidane is a phrase that crops up in French football. Every time there is an attacking midfield player who can kick a ball, they are the new Zidane. We had it with Bruno Cheyrou. We had it with Hatem Ben Arfa. We had it with Dimitri Payet. Any vaguely exciting creative midfielder gets that moniker. And I agree, Guy. I think it's completely unhelpful. It should be this thing that boosts you up if you're Ross Barkley, with the Gaza example, and you go, oh, I can be this great maverick. Actually, it's more a kind of millstone. You've got that pressure. Wilshere, when he goes and bosses the midfield against Barcelona at 18, and there's a nice comparison with Dele Alli there in terms of players who hit the highest point of their career at the beginning of their career, it was never going to get better than that. And he had to be Gaza. He had to be 9 out of 10 every week if we were going to be satisfied with him. And now Jack Wilshere, the 6.5 out of 10 West Ham.
Can't get a game at West Ham, really, in the first team. I think he's lost 7 of the 8 games he started for them. I don't bear him any ill will. I loved watching him at his best, but you just got it so rarely. Who are you compared to, David, in your formative years?
That's such a neat knitting together of that. Whoever ran around a lot in
Gaza.
Carlton Palmer, he came to Nottingham Forest when I was there under Ron Atkinson. And I mean, you've never met a more confident man
really
in your life. Just didn't care one iota about what people's outward perceptions of it.
Really?
He's a man that played for England. I know that there's a different perspective on that, but he was physically fitter than many footballers I've ever seen.
Really?
Drunk like a fish.
Really?
All the great things I admired in footballers of a certain generation.
So you find a Carlton Palmer comparison pretty flattering?
I'd take that. I would take that, yeah.
Who did you want? Who was the one player as a kid you wanted to be?
Well,
the new Zidane?
I enjoyed very early on the Diego Maradona mid-80s to late 80s incarnation of what he was about. Obviously never going to be anywhere near that. Then when Roy Keane came along, I thought he was an extremely wonderful player to try and put yourself anywhere near, and then the reality kind of kicks in when you see these players at close quarters and you just think, my God, what am I doing here? But it was always people that I thought attacked a football match in absolutely the right way, with effort, endeavour, tenacity and aggression. But you've got to stick to what you're good at. Just briefly, Johnny, as you put your pen in the air, I now know what that means. You mentioned Bob Dylan. Your favourite Bob Dylan album?
My favourite Bob Dylan album, without a shadow of a doubt, is Blood on the Tracks. It's
Boom! We can be friends now forever.
It's the single greatest breakup album of all time.
Here.
It is lyrically superb. If you see her, say hello. Just quickly, I grew up wanting to be David Prutton, not just because of the footballing ability, mostly because of the hair.
This is Love Sport.
This Saturday from 8 a.m, join me, Patrick Christys and David Prutton on Love Sport Weekend Breakfast with former England and Lions rugby player Ian Hunter. We'll be with you until noon with all the build-up, updates and analysis of England's battle against old enemy Argentina at the Rugby World Cup. Then next Saturday from 8 a.m, Ewan Thomas, Paul Mortimer and Ian Hunter bring you can't-miss coverage of Le Crunch as England and France face off in a decisive group game. Love Sport Weekend Breakfast Saturday from 8 a.m.
Love Sport.
Have you had enough of extortionate energy bills? A spokesman said could help you find the cheapest energy deals on the market. Don't take our word for it. There's hundreds of spokesman said customers who've saved big. Brian from Derbyshire saved £400 on his energy bills, and Tony from Northampton saved a massive £2,800 on his gas and electric. A spokesmansaid.com, the leading price comparison site where you can switch to the cheapest energy tariffs on the market in just minutes.
The spokesmansaid.com, fighting for you, saving you money.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Are you paying way too much for your energy bills? A spokesman said could help you save big money. With electricity costs continuing to rise, you could save hundreds of pounds by shopping around. Just go to aspokesmansaid.com and look for the very best value energy deals on the market. Don't waste your hard-earned cash. You could be on a much cheaper deal. Go to aspokesmansaid.com.
fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do, the smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Whoa! Look how much saturated fat is in these chocolate biscuits. It's surprising how much is in our food and drinks. For us kids, eating too much saturated fat can lead to harmful fat building up inside, which we can't see, increasing the risk of heart disease or stroke when we get older. So be food smart. Download the free Change for Life food scanner app and start making healthier choices today.
I'm not a snob. I just don't want to be in the same car as my chauffeur.
Love Sport. It's the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. You with me, Johnny Burrow and Guy Watts, joined by special guest, and it turns out, massive Bob Dylan and Neil Young fan, David Prutton. We're with you till 7, but first of all, Guy has all your latest sporting headlines and weather.
I've been chatting away in there of you discussing other musical favourites. Neil Young's come into it, is he?
Yeah, big fan.
I feel really left out now. I can't name many.
You tell us about S Club 7 if you want, Guy.
Reach for... No. What's the one about the harvest from Neil Young? The Gold Rush.
After the Gold Rush.
After the Gold Rush, that's the one. Anyway, the headlines. Chelsea youngsters Tammy Abraham and Fikayo Tomori have been included in England's squad for their Euro 2020 qualifiers with the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. They're also eligible for Nigeria, but would be committed to Southgate's team if they play in either match. Maddison, Mason Mount and Tyrone Mings are all also in the squad from last time, but there's no place for Tottenham midfielder Dele Alli or Man United's Jesse Lingard. Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Kyle Walker are also out, with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Kieran Trippier preferred as right-backs. Man United and Wolves kick off their second Europa League group games in around 20 minutes' time. Academy graduates Mason Greenwood, Angel Gomez and Brandon Williams all start for United, while Wolves have named a strong side to play Besiktas in Istanbul. As I say, those games kick off at 5 to 6. We'll have updates on those for you between now and 7. In rugby, Ireland have bounced back from their shock defeat to host Japan with a comfortable victory at the Rugby World Cup. They've secured a bonus point, 35-0 win over Russia to go top of Pool A. And earlier on, Fiji went second in Pool D after beating Georgia 45-10. And in cricket, Test captain Joe Root won't be based at Headingley in English cricket's new competition, the 100. Ben Stokes has been picked instead by the Northern Superchargers, the team representing the counties of Yorkshire and Durham. Root will play for the Trent Rockets alongside Alex Hales next summer, while another Yorkshireman, Johnny Bairstow, will be with Welsh Fire. Jofra Archer's gone to Hampshire side Southern Brave, and World Cup winning skipper Owen Morgan will play for the Lords-based franchise London Spirit. Weather-wise, a little bit warmer overnight tonight, around 12 degrees or so. Tomorrow doesn't look great, I'm afraid. Highs of 17, but a fair bit of rain around for most of the day, so showers likely. Take your waterproof. That's the latest on Love Sport Drive.
Thanks, Guy. Liverpool have been one of the best sides in the Premier League in the last 2 years. Extraordinary last year, good last night. What a game, 4-3 win against Salzburg. But something which was a huge foundation of their success last year was that back four. Not just the assists going forward from the fullbacks, but their capacity to keep clean sheets. Now, we're in October. They've had 3 clean sheets all season, and one came against MK Dons in the Carabao Cup. They conceded 3 goals against Salzburg last night, having been 3-0 up. And something we heard for a long time last year was Virgil van Dijk. No one dribbled past him for like a year. No one dribbled past him. No one can beat Virgil. He's incredibly solid. Well, Hwan Hee-chan last night sent him absolutely for a hot dog. He came back with the works. He had the onions, he had the chips, everything. Van Dijk doesn't look quite the player he did last year. Something has changed in this Liverpool back four. But for the life of me, I don't know what it is. The players haven't changed. The system hasn't changed. The players in front of them haven't changed. So, David, why are they conceding so many more goals?
I think sometimes we can look at why a team would be in that position. I've always thought defending is a group activity, not just the back four. It's the players in front. It's being able to work as a setup that, as you say, actively repels the opposition. And the kind of personnel that we're talking about would be near on their first choice back four, wouldn't it? You've got players that can go bombing forward in Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, and then Van Dijk and Gomez seem to be the preferred choice. I think it would be superhuman to think that he would go on not being beaten without any players going past him. But I think I suppose if you're a Liverpool fan, if you're in a position where you're kind of going, well, if we carry on in this vein with that nice little cushion between themselves and Manchester City, we still manage to win games, but we'll concede more. And that suddenly gets you a Premier League title. Not suddenly, but over the course of a season. I think they take that because we looked at what they did last season. We looked at the run of form that they went on towards in the back third of it, and the momentum and the rhythm that both City and Liverpool got into. And it was a phenomenal end to a title race. But I think the gap that they've got at this moment in time is a tangible gap. Is something that if they can keep hold of it, could well push them to something that they've not won in such a very long period of time.
Yeah, but a big part of keeping hold of it is going to be keeping goals out of that net.
But if they can outscore, I'm firmly of the belief. We were watching West Brom the other week, and the question that was asked to Slaven Bilic was, "You start slowly, but you seem to come back." And his answer was along the lines of, I don't really care as long as we do come back. So I understand where if you were looking at a team that was struggling to score goals, that was struggling creatively, I think that's when it becomes a massive worry. Obviously, titles are built on solid defences and free-flowing and kind of open-ended attack, which is what Liverpool had last season. Didn't win them a title, though. So I'm not saying it becomes an anomaly where you kind of go, well, what do we do next season? They've not consciously gone, we'll let in more goals and see what happens. But if the byproduct of letting goals in is them scoring more but also winning the same amount or if not more games, that's when tactics, that's when this cerebral kind of plateau of what we like to think about football goes completely out the window. Fundamentally, you have to score more goals than the opposition. That will win you a football match. If they let 3 in but score 4 and win the Premier League and win the Champions League, then statisticians, you can put those stats somewhere that I won't be able to read again.
Yes, no, fair enough. Specifically on Van Dijk, he's obviously a superb player.
Yes.
But we hear a lot of Liverpool fans, and we heard it from Love Sport's very own Kieran Critchard earlier on his superb Premier League fan show, saying he's the best centre-half of the Premier League era. Whenever I hear that, I'm sceptical. For you, is that Van Dijk? Who takes that particular title?
I think when you're quantifying who is the best, you can't. There's an element of the argument where you go, how does this team player make you feel? Therefore, that makes him the best. If you get elation, if you get joy, if you get exuberance, if you get euphoria from watching a certain player or team, that in your head is where you kind of put it the best. And then you get the Jose Mourinho point of view comes slamming in like a huge forehand to the forehead of reality. What have you won? Get your medals on the table. I mean, Rio Ferdinand's rap sheet of what he's won is phenomenal. So he's played in the best team in one of the strongest eras of Premier League football and won the top accolades. He's a name that instantly springs to mind. John Terry's another name that instantly springs to mind. Yes, Virgil van Dijk has won a Champions League, which is one hell of an achievement. But best,
so have those guys.
Exactly, but they've also won the actual title, which.
So if Virgil wins it this year,
I think he would be in the conversation. But you've got to do it for. If you're talking about a sufficient amount of time in the Premier League, you're talking at least 5, 6, 7 years.
No, I think that's a good point. On the defence more broadly, Jurgen Klopp says it's vital that the team improve defensively before facing Leicester at the weekend.
I'm sure Brendan Rodgers thinks if we protect like we did tonight, then probably Jamie Vardy will run 5 times alone on the goalkeeper. So we have to learn quick.
I love the way he says Jamie Vardy. Let's also hear from Leicester boss Brendan Rodgers talking about his time in charge of the Reds.
Those first couple of seasons worked really well for us and we went close to winning the title. Third year was more difficult, but of course there was a great learning in that for me as a coach. But like I said, there was so many highs there for me and so much learning as a young manager at 39 and I'll always be grateful for that.
David, how impressed?
39 when he was there.
It's not bad, is it?
That's genuinely surprising.
And he's still relatively young, doing incredible things with this Leicester side. How impressed have you been by Rodgers and that team? Are they going to be the first outfit to take points off Liverpool?
They fit really well, don't they? I think the team that he's got put together there with a nice cosmopolitan mixture of youth and experience and players from all over the world has turned Leicester into, I think, one of those genuine. You know, when we talk about those teams that are hovering around the top six and who's going to break into it, and for some unknown reason, which I can't get my head around, we chuck West Ham and Everton in there, and you just think, what? No, like Leicester to me is the team that jumps out that could do some serious damage to who would be the kind of forerunners for what the top six would be. And I think perhaps, Jurgen Klopp will be looking at this game very intently, and when he says these words in the media afterwards, it's as much a message to the fans as it is to his own players. If we defend like that, then we're going to be struggling against a team that has got real pace, has got a real creative hub with the players that it's got, and attacks with energy and focus. So he's got to be very, very wary of it. And you can't take away the emotional motivation for Brendan going up against the Liverpool side, because everyone talks about how good this current Liverpool side are. And you get the feeling that there might be a slight hint of, we weren't too bad a couple of years ago. We got very, very close to winning the league in a similar vein. But then suddenly Jurgen's come in with the teeth and the charisma, and suddenly it's kind of blown a little element of that out of the water. Well,
teeth will get you a long way. It's a bit like Nigel Pearson when Claudio Ranieri won the league, and you then get Pearson going, "I won the league." No, you didn't, Nigel. You didn't. You got sacked, and someone else won the league. But last night, Liverpool were up against an unusual club, shall we say, in RB Salzburg, part of the Red Bull footballing revolution. We'll be finding out a bit more about that next.
Giving your team a voice. Love Sport Radio.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Don't get caught out in the great energy price hike as large firms look to charge you more. If you want to save money on your energy bills, it's not too late to see what's on the market. With rising gas and electricity bills, don't get caught out wasting your money on expensive tariffs. A Spokesman Said will show you the very best value deals available. Check out aspokesmansaid.com and you could be using your savings to put towards a well-earned holiday.
With aspokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
There are many things a mother can pass on to her baby. Her smile, her eye colour, and her immunity to whooping cough. Whooping cough is a very dangerous illness for young babies, and at the moment it's spreading fast. A simple vaccination during your pregnancy can help to protect your baby in their first weeks. Please speak to your GP, nurse, or healthcare professional and pass on your immunity.
This is Love Sport.
Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. We're talking RB Salzburg, we're talking RB Leipzig, and the whole situation of the Red Bull franchise in football. It's made them successful, it hasn't made them popular. We're joined on the line by Ronan Murphy, who's a German football expert. Good evening, Ronan. Thanks for joining us. Just for the listeners who aren't perhaps up to speed with this, give us a bit of context about RB Leipzig.
Yeah, so RB Leipzig, the Red Bull wanted to buy a team in Germany a few years ago, and they bought a team in the former East Germany in Leipzig, and they renamed them. They gave them Red Bull colours, Red Bull sponsorship, Red Bulls on the logo, Red Bull everywhere, except because of the way the ownership rules are in Germany, they couldn't call them Red Bulls, so they're called Rasen Ballsport, but for all intents and purposes, everyone knows that this is the Red Bull club, and as a result, with the way they've kind of shot up the division so quickly, the money they've spent, and the fact that they're seen as maybe buying success, they're really not popular at all in Germany.
Ronan, does this kind of reflect on? I mean, we like to be quite traditional, don't we, when we talk about football and the football institutions and the ones that have been there from the ground up. But also we've seen in recent, not only recent years, but over the course of the history of football, teams that go out of business, teams that are financially run very poorly, but you've got a huge multinational corporation taking something over, pumping money into it, running it pretty efficiently and getting results. I mean, as a business model, take away the romance of football, it's going pretty well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They do think, apart from if it wasn't Red Bull, if it was just, I suppose, it was just some rich benefactor, that people mightn't have the same apprehension about it, and they do everything right off the pitch and on the pitch. But because of, I think, who it is, it's just seen as maybe a marketing stunt by some of the fans. But with the way they're kind of challenging in Europe and they're challenging in Germany and they've won the league last few years in Austria, I think they're here to stay. It's not a temporary thing like maybe we might see some other people put their money into clubs.
What has the response of football fans more broadly, football fans across Germany and Austria, been to this RB revolution?
Yeah, it's not. They're probably the most hated team in both countries. The respective teams, they are not fans of them at all. They're fans of opposition clubs, even stage protests. I know you remember the tennis ball protest last year to protest Monday night matches, but the German fans love protests, and they were always protesting against Red Bull Leipzig in any way, shape and form, really.
In terms of Leipzig as a club, though, if we forget the origins, if we forget the name, if we forget the badge, and I appreciate I'm asking us to forget rather a lot here, but they're an exciting team. They're a team who are committed to a philosophy both of playing good football and signing exclusively younger players. They're actually quite a good football team, even if they're not a good football club. Do we as supporters need to get over ourselves, accept that this is the way that football is going, that, as you say, they're here to stay, and actually they're building something that could be, on the pitch at least, actually quite special?
Yeah, probably. I think the way they play football is an attractive 4-2-2-2 formation, and we've seen Ralph Hasenhüttl kind of try to bring that across with him to Southampton from Germany because it was so successful at Leipzig, and that's the kind of formation that they all play. And I think because of that, maybe the teams, there's so much kind of a merry-go-round of transfers as well as the teams. But the way they play football, the way they operate their business is it's probably going to be a model to follow for some teams, even though they might hate to admit it.
And Ron, I mean, with the kind of cross-pollination of the teams that they've got globally, I mean, we've seen, the former head coach of the New York Red Bulls, Jesse Marsch, he was at New York, he went to Leipzig as an assistant, now he's at Salzburg. I mean, there's a man that's benefited from the kind of global reach of what this corporation is in cherry-picking these sides and creating kind of like a universal approach to football in different countries.
Yeah, it would. And I think because of the kind of connections between the club, they can develop players and coaches in that means. I suppose the best example is probably Naby Keita. He started off at Salzburg, then he moved to Leipzig, and now he's playing for the most successful team in Europe at the moment. So there's that kind of pathway for footballers to kind of show what they can do. And even in the last year or two, players have moved from Salzburg to Leipzig. But there's even a level down from that. Salzburg have a team in the Austrian First Division, Liefering, and they exclusively only play teenagers, and that's seen as the breeding ground, the very first step. So they won the youth league in 16-17. So they're the kind of team that you should be looking. If you're wondering who the next superstar is going to be, maybe have a look at some of their matches, and you might pick out someone who's going to be a star in years to come.
That's pretty cool. Are we going to see... It is cool. David Prutton's laughing at me. It's objectively cool.
Yeah, it was such a cloppism, that, wasn't it?
It's pretty cool. I mean, if we defend like that, it's not so cool. Ronan, are we going to see more RB franchises on the horizon? Could we even see one in England?
Yeah, there was talk last year there might be I'm not sure whether it was RB Bradford or RB Brentford. It didn't really take off the ground. But
doesn't roll off the tongue either, does it, Ronan? Wow.
Yeah, there was some fans on Twitter mocking up logos for them, but it's just a bull and the name of the city, so it's not too difficult to create one. But yeah, I think with the way they're going, they have a team in Brazil as well, obviously, and they're looking at the Asian and Australian markets. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years they do put money into England especially if they can prove success in Germany and maybe get Leipzig to win the Bundesliga.
Ronan, fantastic to talk to you. Thank you for your time and all of that detailed explanation. Really appreciate it. Ronan Murphy there, who is German football expert, giving his take on the RB franchises. I think we as football fans, and certainly football fans in Germany, are a bit holier than thou about the whole thing. Because
I'm jumping in there, Johnny. You're absolutely right, because what sprung to mind as we're discussing that, I mean, obviously you're looking at the different Red Bull franchises there, but again, I mean, Manchester City, New York City FC,
exactly that, Melbourne.
Exactly, it's done in similar ways. Coaches working for different factions of the same company.
Players, Aaron Moy going from Melbourne to Man City. It's all equally incestuous, frankly. And just because they're nominally football, well, why are they football? It's a state rather than an energy drink brand. But we're playing the same game here, right?
Mm-hmm. And if you think about the business side of what football has become, it's got to be done in a way that's self-sufficient. It's got to be done in a way that's successful and generates income, money, global appeal and global attention. And they're doing exactly that. We're very quick to steam in and say, that's a poorly run football club. I can't believe this has happened to it. I can't believe you're asking for bailouts, administration, etc. Yet we're not happy on the other side when a company that can quite obviously make money is going, right, we're going to back these and see where we end up with it.
And backing young players as well. Well, in other news from things that are poorly run, Guy Watts has got an athletics update.
Hey, very nice, Johnny. Yes, a quick one for you. Obviously, last night, we had the incredible Dina Asher-Smith making history. We're going to hear from Ewan Thomas, who was out there, spoke to her first, of course, after that incredible victory, just after 6. But there could be more medal success. And I don't mean any medal, I mean a gold medal. And it could be gold for Katarina Johnson-Thompson, who, of course, has got the best name of any athlete competing in these World Championships. She's extended her lead in the latest event. She's extended her lead over Nafi Tiam in the long jump. KJT has got 6.77 metres. Tiam could only manage 6.4. Her lead is now at 216 points. The javelin is up next, and we think Nafi Tiam's got a bit of a dodgy elbow as well, and that's coming up in around 15 minutes' time. We'll have updates for you throughout that and in the rest of the show. The final event in the Tathlon later tonight, of course.
And, of course, the 800 metre, it's where she's strongest, so keep an eye out.
And that's the last event, isn't it? Could be gold.
Love sport.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Don't get caught out by rising energy bills this year. Leading price comparison site A Spokesman Said can help you save money in just minutes. Plus, sign up to A Spokesman Said to get the latest super cheap collective energy deals. These offers are such great value, they aren't even available direct from the energy companies. Savvy customers have saved over £10 million from collective energy deals. Go to aspokesmansaid.com and you could be saving big money on your bills.
With aspokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Oh, it's okay. Let's face it, when your kids are ill, you'd do anything to help them feel better. But remember, antibiotics aren't always needed. You might not realise it, but taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk of a longer and more severe illness. Help keep your family well. Always take your doctor's advice on antibiotics. Search NHS antibiotics. All better.
We've got a top-class hour coming up for you on Posh Boys on Drive. You with me, Johnny Burrow, Guy Watts, and special guest David Prutton, emphatically getting his papers in order until 7. We're talking athletics, reflecting on Dina Asher-Smith's brilliance, talking Lord Coe's big mouth as well. We'll be hearing from Ewan Thomas on KJT, who could be in line for a gold of her own. We're talking England squad. Dele Alli has been left out. Is there a way back in? And those Chelsea youngsters are in the frame. Are they the future? Lots to get our teeth into, but first, it's time for the news.
On digital radio, online, mobile and smart speaker. This is Love Sport. News.
From the Sky News Centre at 6, 3 police officers and an admin worker have been killed during a knife attack at the force headquarters in Paris. It's understood a 45-year-old man who'd worked there for 20 years was behind it. Scotland is to become the first part of the UK to ban the smacking of children. Members of the Scottish Parliament have voted in the past hour to make it a criminal offence. The country's Children's Minister, Marie Todd, has dismissed criticism from some MSPs that the change will lead to confusion.
There is not a problem with the clarity of the law. What the removal of the defence means is very clear. Parents and carers will no longer be able to use the reasonable chastisement defence.
Boris Johnson's launched a charm offensive aimed at rallying support for his Brexit plan in Westminster and with EU leaders. The European Union's top negotiator says they want workable and effective solutions after the Prime Minister outlined his new proposal yesterday. Meanwhile, one of Boris Johnson's former aides claims he asked for his friend Jennifer Arcuri to be involved on a trade trip which she'd initially been turned down for. They've both denied breaking any rules. Our correspondent Laura Bundock has spoken to a source at London City Hall who organised the trip to Israel when Mr Johnson was mayor.
They told me they were literally sat in the hotel in Tel Aviv when Jennifer Arcuri walked in. This person turns to one of the organisers and asks, "What's Jennifer Arcuri doing here?" And this person says apparently the mayor asked for her to be involved.
8 people have been arrested after climate change activists sprayed the Treasury in central London with fake blood. An old fire engine was used for the stunt. And in sport, some of the British clubs playing in the Europa League tonight have kicked off their matches. All are away, with Manchester United at Dutch side AZ Alkmaar, Wolves are facing Turkey's Besiktas, and Rangers are taking on Swiss side Young Boys. It's currently goalless in all 3 games. That's the latest. I'm Kit Bradshaw.
Love Sport Radio. On digital radio, online, mobile and smart speaker.
This is the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive.
Good evening. You are listening to the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. You're with me, Johnny Burrow, Guy Watts, and special dancing guest David Prutton.
Who decides the music? That's always intrigued me.
It's a standardised music.
Is it?
It is Charlemagne My Blossoms, I believe. Guy is nodding.
So you can't come in with Simple Twist of Fate or anything like that. We should can you imagine nice and low key?
You know what? One time before the end of the show, we will have to have a song of Blood on the Tracks.
Yes.
Our top stories this evening, we're reacting to the England squad Gareth Southgate has named, not least the exclusion of Dele Alli. We're looking back on Dina Asher-Smith's absolute dominance last night. What a gold medal. For anyone saying she only won because her rivals dropped out, that time would have been good enough for gold at 13 of 17 World Championships. A proper performance. We're also talking Salazar, so Mo Farah's former coach who's been banned for doping for 4 years, and of course Lord Coe, who's got it in for the BBC, and Gabby Logan. It appears, David, that Gareth Southgate might have got it in for Dele Alli, at least for now, not in his plans. What's he got to do to get back into them?
Well, it's a simple case of upping your form, being more consistent, taking control of games as we know he can do, and being able to be in a position where the manager can't not pick him, in a sense of being right in the forefront, driving Tottenham back to where they want to be within the realms of the Premier League. European football in the shape of the Champions League is a wonderful platform for him to showcase his talents. And it comes to all players. I mean, even I would say probably the very greatest players, their fallow periods are very few and far between and relatively short. But every player is at the mercy of form and fitness, regardless of who they are. So I think it becomes a nice little leveler, a bit of a reality check perhaps. It's been an ascent so far. Maybe we're looking at a slight bit of plateauing, and obviously what you've got to be very mindful of when the plateau comes, that you don't dip the other side of it, you go again.
Do you think one of the problems that Dele Alli is having is a kind of minor identity crisis of sorts? He started off as this goal-scoring attacking midfielder who ran beyond. He's now been playing as a deep-lying midfield player, and when he operates for England, he often ends up floating wide, not quite knowing where he's meant to be, not quite knowing what he wants to do with the football. Do you know what his best position is, and do you think he knows that?
I think it's a tremendous point, Johnny, because if you are, I mean, so if you're the deep lying midfielder, you've got to have an exceptional range of passing, and also I'd say organisational and leadership skills, because it's the fulcrum of what happens in a team comes from there more often than not. If you're playing slightly further up, what we've seen perhaps from someone like Raheem Sterling is rapid pace, which is now allied to a final product. And with James Maddison, you've got delivery from set pieces. You've got the ability to take the ball in tight areas and do something with it, which that was the stick that was used to beat English players with for such a long period of time. I'd say probably a generation ago, that they're not technically as good as the European and world counterparts. But no matter what we think about the state of the national team or whether they should be winning X, Y, and Z, the development path for coaching has been there, that it's created players like that. So suddenly you go, wow, there's another one, Mason Mount pops in, and suddenly you've got players that can really handle a football, which sounds very much like common sense if you're the layperson thinking, well, that's what football needs to do. So when we talk about Dele and sometimes not and what will fall into the conundrum as well is where he thinks is his best position, a bit like what we saw with Theo Walcott. He very much fancied himself as a striker.
He wasn't one.
Exactly, but then he was a winger because of the pace, but didn't have the delivery. So you're kind of going, well, you're very quick, so what do we do now with you? And that was a different conundrum altogether. But I think, like you say, for Dele Alli to be in those positions where he can kind of get beyond the opposition midfield, and especially when you see him playing with Tottenham when they're at the very, very best, being able to play balls into Harry Kane, playing on the shoulder, looking to unlock defences. If it does go beyond the midfield, that pocket between the midfield and defence, I think is very, very good in. But as you quite rightly say, Johnny, getting beyond and having the ability, the athletic capacity to get beyond and stretch games allows other players to come into play. So I think that was his best position. I don't think the deep line midfielder one really suits him too much.
Yeah, for me, he's not an Iniesta.
No.
He's not an Eriksen.
And again, not many are an Iniesta.
True. But I think even players who are much less good than Dele Alli, who know how to play that role, can influence an entire team. Mark Noble, who's a fairly standard midfield player, does it for West Ham.
Jordan Henderson.
Exactly. Dele Alli, well, I actually think Jordan Henderson's quite good, but that's one
for another. I think he's a fantastic player.
Dele Alli isn't one of those guys. He's not going to make the entire team operate in a different way. So for me, as soon as he stops scoring the goals, he's out the team. That's how I see it. 18 months ago, Poch said he thought Ali was the best 21-year-old in world football. Looking back on it with the benefit of hindsight, was that unhelpful?
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? If he then went on to scale the heights, if we were looking at him as suddenly a Champions League winner, regardless of what effect he had on the actual run-up and the actual final itself and that following season, then it would be a slightly different consideration. He doesn't strike me as a young man that struggles for confidence, so I think being handed that type of moniker, I think we spoke about it earlier, about it being an albatross around his. I don't sense that is the case for him. I mean, having never spent any time in his company, this is the perception that I get off the way that he plays and also how he comes across in the media. So I wouldn't think that would be too much for him to handle, but then it's always going to be there. We talked about comparisons between good players of yesteryear and new players coming through. Such and such is the new whatever. It will always be the case. Those discussions will always happen, and it's up to the player to take it on board or completely disregard it.
But it's interesting to contrast Pochettino's early treatment of Dele Alli with the way that Frank Lampard talks about Mason Mount, about Tammy Abraham, about Callum Hudson-Odoi. Treats them all in the same way. Whenever a journalist says, Frank, Mason Mount has been brilliant, he goes, yes, he has. He's working very hard. He's got a lot more to add to his game. He's got a lot more work to do. He's got to work just to stay here. So I need to see more from him. I think for me, that's what a manager needs to be doing. They need to be pushing them on. They need to be demanding excellence rather than going, oh, Dele, you're fantastic. Because he might just one day wake up and think, yeah, I am. Cheers, Poch.
Yeah, so I've got to the point, because as all the kind of top players and top managers say, I mean, the hard work really does begin once you are at the perceived top to stay there, because there's so many people coming after you straight away. And I think what, as you say, Frank's done with the players at Chelsea. Plus, I think there's been a nice grounding for those players that have put the hard yards in the Championship, which, as we know, is a very tough division. And to be in that position where they're now seeing the fruit that's born out of that real tough upbringing in league football means that they're quite robust. They've been through robust seasons for good clubs, and now they're in a position where they've got themselves into the national side. And I think with Frank being a rookie himself in management, and managers approach it in different ways. He's quite cool, calm, collected, Frank, isn't he? You spend any time in the vicinity of Maurizio Pochettino, and this is not for one second saying Frank Lampard isn't a very charming man, but the charisma that bounces off Poch when things are great, it was the same as coming across Mourinho in the very, very early days of him being in English football. My
Just
God,
that aura.
just he walked down a tunnel and there'd be a glow, and like a magnet, people are attracted to it. And I think that's a natural gift. I mean, there's that book, isn't there, about the charisma myth, but people that have that natural ability to warm a room are wonderful people to be around. And he certainly, when he said that, and as Guy mentioned it, the kind of what's happened in the interim, when he said that'd have been said with genuine affection, wouldn't it? Almost paternal in a sense of, my God, son, you're a fantastic footballer. This is what I think of you. And it wouldn't have been said with any kind of preemptive thoughts to blow too much smoke up his backside. And then after that, it's up to the player to perform. I mean, he's old enough now. I was going to say he's ugly enough, but he's not ugly, is he, at all? He's old enough now to know that what happens next in his career is very much his responsibility and down to him.
It is indeed. Of course, those England squad omissions and inclusions are our big talking point today, but we're also talking plenty about the brilliant Dina Asher-Smith. She made history with her 200-metre gold medal at the World Championships last night. And earlier on, I caught up with Love Sport's very own Ewan Thomas, who's out in Qatar, and spoke to her after that brilliant victory last night. Ewan, thanks for joining us. 3 words for you. Dina Asher-Smith. She did it. She won the gold in the women's 200 metres. How good was that to see?
It was awesome. I told you she would do it. I wasn't sure she was going to win by that much of a margin, but she's just looked supremely brilliant through every single round. And I got to chat to her after. She started crying on the lap of honour, and she made my floor manager cry, who's 6'4" and huge. It was just lovely to see the emotions coming out of her, and all the Brits there really felt it for her. And she's such a lovely girl. I've said it before, and I'll always say it. Not only is she an amazing athlete, she's a marketer's dream. She's got everything about her to be a global superstar, and she's just a nice girl. So there's no one else you want to see win, just her. Love her.
There are going to be people pointing at this win and saying, listen, some of her big competitors dropped out. It's not as good as it could have been. But actually, her time would have been good enough to win 13 of the 17 World Championships in this event. Is she just the best now in the 200 metres? Does this bode well for Tokyo?
It does. Look, at the end of the day, you can only beat who's there. She smashed the British record. She's run the fastest time she's ever run. She becomes the first Briton ever to win a global 200-metre title. She is the queen of the track. It doesn't matter who would have been there last night. I truly think she would have beaten anyone. If she can keep injury-free, she's just going to get better and better. And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't mind being her agent, because she's got everything about her to be a megastar. And honestly, everyone out here is delighted for her, because she's just so nice. She really is. And you've got to remember, in 2012, she was a kit carrier. She was one of the young girls walking around carrying the kit for the athletes, thinking, cool, it'd be good to be here one day. 7 years later, she's world champion.
Extraordinary stuff. What was the atmosphere like in the stadium? Were the fans there? Was it a bit more full? Were people going mad for her?
Yeah, I mean, it's not sold out, obviously, but everyone who's in there really is making a lot of noise. And I think for the athletes, it's all about having that tunnel vision and having that drive and that ambition to block out the crowd, block out any noise, and just give it everything. And when she came through the line, she almost just looked shocked that she won it, but it was never in doubt for me. All of us, my floor manager, the cameraman, we all said, yeah, she's going to win this easily. I knew she was going to win. I was that confident.
Has she got a good chance of a third medal in the relay as well?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Every time I've spoke to her, I've said, well, you know, you're there after the 100 metres. She said, no, the job's not done yet. After last night, I said, well, job's done now. She goes, no, it's not. I've still got the relay. She's so focused. She knows the championships isn't just about the 200 and the 100. She's got the 4x1. And I tell you what, she wouldn't want to hear it, but she could run a blinding 4x4. If she ever wanted to do a 400 leg, she'd be the best at that as well.
Wow, Ewan, talking her up. Just finally, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, an absolutely searing start to the heptathlon. Can she finally get a world medal and a gold?
I hope so. I mean, she set 2 personal bests and 1 season's best out of the first 4 events, so she's clearly absolutely flying. Nafi Thiem, who is the world record holder, she's going to be good, the big Belgium athlete, but Katarina Johnson-Thompson, KJT, is very good at the last event. The 800 metres is her event, so it might all come to that, which is brilliant to watch.
And what's KJT like to deal with as a person?
She's nice as well. She's a little bit quieter than some. Quite often she just wants to keep her head down and get on with it. And obviously the multi-eventers, they don't have much time in between events. So every time I've tried to grab an interview with her, she's literally like, oh, do you mind? Can I skip it? Because I've got the high jump in 20 minutes. And I'm like, of course you can. So, she has to keep busy. She has to keep focused. And they're out there for 2 days, 2 grueling days. And one thing you will see at the end of the heptathlon, they're all like sisters. They get on so well. They all do a lap of honour. Whoever's won, they're all in it together. And I think they just respect the fact they've gone through so many events together, and they've just got respect for each other. And I think she'll get a medal. I would say she'll definitely get the silver, but I'm fingers crossed that she's going to get the gold.
It would be great to see. You and I should go up against each other in a heptathlon someday. I think it would be very interesting indeed, although you would have...
Only one winner there, Johnny.
Only one
Maybe
winner.
the high... You might have a chance in the high jump. I'll give you that one, but that'll be it.
You'd batter me there, mate, as well. Great to talk to you, as always.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for your time. Ewan Thomas, their former world champion, catching up with us all the way from Doha, and he'll be back with us on Love Sport Drive very, very soon. Always great to catch up with Ewan. And talking of Katarina Johnson-Thompson, she's currently in action in the heptathlon. She's extended her lead since the long jump. She's on the penultimate event, the javelin. She's looking very, very good. The last event, remember, is the 800 metres. The starting gun, 10 o'clock tonight. It is her strongest event in the heptathlon. As things stand, she's on for gold. Go on, KJT.
This is Love Sport.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it...
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. This means that travelling to the EU will change. You'll need to check online if your passport is valid for travel to Europe. If you're planning on driving, you'll need to check if you have the right documents to drive. And make sure your travel insurance covers all your healthcare needs. To keep your trip on track, check what you need to do at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Before you set off on a long journey, remember to check your vehicle. Are your tyres correctly inflated? And are the treads deep enough? Have you got enough fuel? Is your oil level right? Checking your vehicle doesn't take long, but can prevent a breakdown or accident, and save you money. So, before you set off on a long journey, check your tyres, fuel, and oil. Highways England, connecting the country.
I believe in traditional marriage. I've had 3 of them.
This is Love Sport.
We're reacting to Gareth Southgate's England squad this evening, and there is a certain club who are very much in the mix. We're joined on the line by David Chidgey from the Chelsea Fan Show and Chelsea Fancast. Good evening, Chidge. Thank you for joining us. It's an England squad dominated by young Chelsea youth products. That is a sentence I never thought I'd say. Where's this come from?
I can't believe it's a sentence you never thought you would say. Good evening, by the way, Johnny B. I hope you're well.
Very well, thank you, mate.
Particularly, look, I think the thing is, Southgate, as we know, and to his eternal credit and to the excitement of, a lot of fans who follow England, made the decision a year or two ago to kind of really bring through a lot of the talented youth players in the country. Not least, of course, because, we have a real dearth of English players playing in the Premier League, so it was a natural thing to do. But I think the other thing you need to consider is how successful the underage groups have been doing for England over the last 5 years. And at Chelsea, we're seeing a similar thing, and you're seeing players like Mount, Abraham, Loftus-Cheek, of course, Hudson-Odoi, Reece James, Tammy Abraham, all coming through. Now, what we're seeing at Chelsea is how well these lads play together, having done so successfully for Chelsea. And of course, they've done that at international level too. Chelsea had 5 players on their books who were part of the England under-17 World Cup winning squad. So I'm really not surprised at all to see them get through to full international honours, or the team, because they've already been doing it at the under-21s, under-17s, and so on.
Chidge, does it really reflect how important timing can be in football? Because
hell yeah,
maybe if Frank hadn't come into the Chelsea team, with the restrictions financially being able to bring players in and out, suddenly all these players that were on this ridiculous WhatsApp group of 30 plus that are out on loan somewhere have now been brought back to the mothership, and then everyone's going, oh, they're actually really good. But now they're getting the chance both domestically and internationally, aren't they?
Yeah, David, you're absolutely right, mate. It's serendipity, really, isn't it? I'm absolutely sure that had Chelsea done what they normally do, which is to go for the next big, European elite manager on the cab rank, as it were, then they would have done what all the others have done, which is, knowing that their neck is on the line, to go and win a Premier League or a European trophy or a cup. They will go with tried and tested international players of standing and repute, and they wouldn't have given the youth players much of a look in. A lot of our youth players have got the odd game or two or the odd minute or two, but when your job's on the line, I can understand why they do it. They go with what they know and what they trust. And that has absolutely impeded the development of a lot of really talented players. The counter-argument to that is that maybe this bunch just really, really are talented and they would have found their way through eventually. But the evidence beforehand wouldn't suggest that, would it?
Chidge, where should Tammy Abraham and Fikayo Tomori be in that England pecking order? Because they're doing very well, but they're very new, not just to England, but to Chelsea as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Look, let's take Tammy Abraham first. He's 22, and I think he's second to only Sergio Aguero, going all Martin Tyler there. He's second to only Aguero in the top goal scorers in the Premier League. So he's the leading English goal scorer. So on that basis, you could say he makes a very strong case for starting. Obviously, we've got Harry Kane, and Harry Kane's the captain, and Harry Kane is more than tried and tested. So I'd be surprised if he dislodges Kane. But it would be good to see him get some minutes, certainly. He'd be great to bring on as an impact sub, for example.
And what have you made of his flirtation with Nigeria? He's obviously entitled to do that, but do you think he's committed to England?
From what I understand, and to be brutally honest with you, Johnny, I haven't, completely up on the situation. From what I understand, it looks like he's been selected for the squad now, so it's all kind of past the event, isn't it? But it's difficult, isn't it? These kids, Tammy's been with Chelsea since he was 8 years old, but we live in a very different international world these days. When you look at the cricket and you look at the number of, South Africans, Jofra Archer, of course, is a Bajan, so it's a very different world from the one I grew up in, where basically if you're English, you played for England and that was that. So, equally, if you've got Nigerian parents or you're half Nigerian or whatever, I can understand why in this day and age they'll think, well, where's the best opportunity for me to go and play at the international level? Zaha's done it for the Ivory Coast, hasn't he? So you can understand why they do it. We are in a different world than we used to be in when I was growing up as a kid.
I think, Chid, you're absolutely right there. And are we looking at a group of players that it's very much down to them which way their careers go, and it's a nice conversation to have, a nice dilemma, isn't it, when you're talking about the potential of a Chelsea centre forward being potentially the first choice for England as and when Harry Kane develops and evolves and moves on, as every kind of time frame in a footballer's career does. But these players, the fact that they've had a lot of schooling in the Football League, the fact that they're now playing for Chelsea's first team, the future, as you look toward it as a Chelsea fan, is it realistic enough, going back to what you said about, yes, they're in the team because of serendipity, but are you looking at a group of players, and I hate to use the reference in Manchester United because I know you probably hate that, but that class of 92 where there was a real kind of development of players at the same time that had the club in the blood, that led them to an unparalleled seasons of success. Is that something that you feel could happen with this bunch?
Well, I really do. We've got a very small window, haven't we? Because there is a possibility that the transfer ban might get lifted in January, but on the assumption that it won't be until next summer that we can buy players. We've got this season really to get these players into the side, get them bedded in, and get them performing really, really well, which, up till now that they've done. Most supporters would absolutely love and welcome that, because these kids, they've been there since they were 8. They've got a real affinity with the club. They understand the culture and the history of it, what it's about to play for Chelsea. They're English. They're London-based. They are like us. They have an affinity for the club, and that's why I think you get lots of supporters desperate to see youngsters coming through the club and then ending up playing for the first team. Looking forward, if you could have 6 of those guys in the first team by the end of the season quite easily. But you still need senior players. You still need international quality players if you're a club like Chelsea and you want to win stuff. You actually also need world-class players too. So what will be really interesting, I think, is to see what happens at the end of the season when we are able to buy players again. And hopefully what they'll do is that they'll spend a huge amount of money that they have available, thanks to various transfers they've done recently, in buying a couple of really good world-class players in the right positions that we need, rather than doing what they've been doing over the last 5 years or so, which is predominantly spending it on squad players, much to the annoyance and irritation of the supporters. So, yeah, get a couple of world-class players in, but, build a team around these youngsters. They're fantastic.
It's an exciting time, Chidge. Great to speak to you. Thank you for your time. David Chidgey there from the Chelsea Fan Show and Chelsea Fancast. The cynic in me, David Prutton.
There can't be one,
There
Johnny.
can't. Is there a cynic?
Beaming out of that lovely, friendly face.
Stop it, you. I think there is an element of Tammy still flirting with Nigeria as a way of putting pressure on Gareth to play him. I know Gareth is saying, I'm not going to cap him just to tie him down, because that would be unethical. But in practice, he is more likely to play a player who might go off and play for a different nation, isn't he? So is there a little bit of gamesmanship going on here from Tammy?
But I think if you're looking at it from a sinister point of view, perhaps yes. I think Tammy has got a decent amount of leverage at this moment in time. I'm not saying that you should leverage your place into the national side because of the way that he started the season, because they'll know all about Tammy from the different age groups that he's managed to work his way up through. Obviously, the under-21 tournament notwithstanding, because that was an absolute disaster from start to finish. But it's been shown that there is a pathway through that side into the first team and into an established starting place in that first team. So I think he's got to keep an eye on that. And again, but I'm saying this as an Englishman who loves to watch the national side, would understand how proud it would be to kind of turn out for the full international side. But history and heritage, tradition in a family, what his thought process is away from, let's take it away from the footballing aspect. If he has familial ties to Nigeria, if there's an element of wanting to represent where his family's from, whereas the kind of broad scheme of his family history, if that's reflected as he feels as an Englishman or as a Nigerian, it's a very bespoke and niche dilemma that he's got on his hands here, and it's very much up to the individual. From a purely footballing perspective, the global appeal of playing for England and the chance to do something in a national tournament you feel should be loaded towards being an England side, but it's sometimes the decision would transcend what would happen on a football pitch.
I just sometimes feel that these youngsters, I think they have a massive decision that goes way beyond the sort of things you and I sitting here going, he should play for England, he should play for Nigeria. It's a complex decision, and if we were in the situation where we had mixed nationality or dual nationality or whatever, it probably wouldn't be an easy one. I just feel sometimes at the young age they can rush into it. Scott McTominay's one, for example, he could have chosen England or Scotland. I listened to him, he sounds more English than he sounds Scottish. I know he's got a Scottish name, and I look at him playing well for Man United, to be honest, and I just mainly think I would quite like you to be available for England at some point, but he's chosen Scotland, and he's got every right to do that. Last night, by the way, Rio Ferdinand, watching Tammy Abraham for BT Sport, made this comparison, which I thought was quite interesting.
I saw elements in Tammy's game today that I hadn't seen as much as I'd like to before. His hold-up play, coming to the ball, bringing others into play. In the first half, one ball went up to him. It was Didier Drogba-esque. Chests it down for someone, runs on for the next phase, and I think he's developing nicely.
A bold comparison from Rio Ferdinand, not one I had certainly had made myself before last night. Perhaps he had something in it, but then I feel like Rio Ferdinand's lost something of his credibility, has he not?
Man United might not thank me, but get the contract out, put it on the table, Yeah. Let him sign it. Let him write whatever numbers he wants to put on there, given what he's done now since he's come in, and let him sign the contract and go. Ollie's at the wheel, man. He's doing it. He's doing his thing. Man United are back.
Are you enjoying yourself,
Some
Guy?
things don't age well very quickly, do they?
I have nothing against Rio, but I do find it quite amusing and we've seen it this week, and we've talked about Harry Kane and Spurs and Poch and all their issues today, and stories today suggesting Spurs are now becoming actively worried about Harry Kane. I think they should be, but one of the leading figures in that debate, if you like, has been Rio. He says he should be leaving Spurs to kind of further his career if he's got ambitions. I get that completely. It's not a Spurs or a Man United bias at all. I think he is completely right, but I do find it amusing how, you know, Rio, for example, was so wrong in some ways. It could be long-term a good decision to give Ollie the contract that he got, but you listen back to that and you almost cringe. You laugh, but you cringe. And, you know, as a pundit, you can get that wrong. We've all probably made bold predictions on some sort of airwaves or TV or whatever it might be, and it backfires, but that one is looking so bad at the moment that I feel like maybe we should just step back from allowing Rio Ferdinand to dictate a newsline.
Guy, you are aware that the bloke has got married in the last couple of weeks, and he's revelling
Last week or so, I think, Johnny.
In revelling.
He'll be on honeymoon.
So he's obviously out of his mind anyway.
Exactly. He's enjoying himself. He's moving on. It's a new chapter in his life. He's having a great time, and you're here. Rio made
Pouring
a bad
water
call.
on the whole thing.
Well, Rio, if you're listening and I've ruined your honeymoon period, I'm very sorry. But if you're listening to us a few days after you got married, then, well, I don't know.
Good taste.
It could be going better, is what I'd say.
Love sport. Think the energy price cap will save you money? Think again. You could be saving a lot more on cheaper energy tariffs. Price comparison site A Spokesman Said will show you just how much money you could be saving against your current tariff. Don't throw away your hard-earned money to the energy companies. Check out aspokesmansaid.com and you could switch to cheaper bills in minutes.
thespokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
The Novotel London Blackfriars, the official hotel partner of Love Sport. Located just minutes away from the city and London's famous South Bank. You can kick back and taste the flavours of the world at the Jamboree Bar and Grill and enjoy all the sights of London in style. The Novotel London Blackfriars.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. Brexit will bring changes that affect businesses in many ways, particularly if you buy from EU suppliers, sell to EU customers, provide services to EU clients, and receive customer data from other businesses in the EU. Businesses need to prepare. Find out how at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.
Are you paying way over the odds for your car insurance? The spiralling costs put people off driving, full stop. But you're a careful driver, and realistically, you'll only need an insurance payout if some halfwit cuts you off on the M1. So you shouldn't be forced to pay massive car insurance premiums. And you don't have to. Go to price comparison site aspokesmansaid.com today and find out the best value car insurance deals on the market. Don't pay the price for not shopping around.
thespokesmansaid.com. Fighting for you, saving you money.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit wedooh.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
If you fall asleep at the wheel, you'll put your life in danger, and the lives of others as well. Before you feel tired, pull off the road into a services or other safe area. Drink some strong coffee, and take a quick nap while the caffeine kicks in.
If you're having a nap, you've left your lights on, sir.
Right, cheers.
Think. Don't drive tired.
This is Love Sport.
It's the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. You're with me, Johnny Burrow, Guy Watts, and special guest David Prutton, former Forest and Leeds midfielder. We're with you till 7, and Guy Watts has just looked out the window to make sure he's correct. He's got all the latest weather and sporting headlines.
I do. I'll have your weather for you in just a moment. Top story this afternoon, of course, this evening. Chelsea youngsters Tammy Abraham and Fikayo Tomori have been included in England's squad for their Euro 2020 qualifiers with the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. They're also eligible for Nigeria, of course, but would be committed to Gareth Southgate's team if they play in either match. James Maddison, Mason Mount and Tyrone Mings will keep their places in the squads, but there is no place for Spurs midfielder Dele Alli or Man United's Jesse Lingard. Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Kyle Walker are also out, with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Kieran Trippier preferred as right-backs. Man United and Wolves both in Europa League action, and Rangers for that matter as well, but all of those 3 games currently goalless after around 40 minutes. We'll have more updates on those for you between now and 7. In rugby, Ireland have bounced back from their shock defeat to host Japan with a comfortable victory at the Rugby World Cup. They've secured a bonus point 35-0 win over Russia to go top of Pool A, and earlier on Fiji went second in Pool D after beating Georgia 45-10. And Test cricket captain Joe Root won't be based at Headingley in English cricket's new competition, the 100. Ben Stokes has been picked instead by the Northern Superchargers, the team representing the counties of Yorkshire and Durham. Root will play for the Trent Rockets alongside Alex Hales next summer, while another Yorkshireman, Johnny Bairstow, will be with Welsh Fire. Jofra Archer's gone to Hampshire side Southern Brave, and World Cup winning skipper Owen Morgan will play for the Lords-based franchise London Spirit. We'll have a bit more on that story for you in a moment's time. But first, the weather. It's not raining right here, right now in central London as we speak, but there is a little bit more rain around this evening. It looks like into the night, lows overnight of 12 degrees or so. Highs tomorrow of 17, and plenty more showers around tomorrow, I'm afraid, for most of the day, it looks like. So do take your umbrella or your waterproofs. That's the latest here on Love Sport Drive.
Thank you, Guy. We're talking about the 100 a lot, not least because every single team, and I mean every single one, is sponsored by a kind of snack company. It's either crisps or popcorn or peanuts. Quite extraordinary. As a format more broadly, what do we make of it? Do we think it's going to lack some of the subtlety of Test cricket? We've enjoyed
Some of the subtlety.
Some of the subtlety, indeed. We enjoyed, even in one day where you've got fewer balls to deal with, you still have that element of cat and mouse, of strategy. Whereas with this, 100 balls, you're very unlikely to get bowled out. It's just a smashing match, isn't it?
There's something ironic, wasn't there, in me shouting something of the subtlety into a off microphone. Whoever is in charge of turning the microphones on and off needs to be sacked, quite frankly. Yes, Johnny, in short, it's impossible to know what to expect. I think in reality, for all the talk and the criticism as well, and I've been someone who's criticised it because I don't think you need to be out with an agenda against the new format or the idea of it or the ECB or anything to suggest that it's been pretty poorly managed from a PR point of view. It's been very confusingly managed, to say the least. We haven't really known exactly what format it's going to take. I think we do now, but for a long time we didn't. And for all the money that's gone into it, you've got to question exactly what return you're going to see on that. But I think I do want it to succeed because I like watching exciting cricket. It's obviously going to lack the subtlety of, say, Test cricket. It might even lack the subtlety of 2020 cricket, but that's kind of the point. I don't think you go into this game thinking, what really revolutionary new things am I going to see? You're just there to watch. Good, fun, exciting cricket is the idea. And I say that, they've appointed some of the biggest name coaches in limited overs cricket, the Stephen Flemings, Jai Wardner, Shane Warnes, and the likes of those players, or former players of this world. And they, I'm sure, will be kind of concocting, theories and schemes and working out how to get the edge over each other. But I think the point is that to a spectator, it's meant to be even more of a kind of bish, bash, bosh, blast, fireworks, all the rest of it than the T20 currently is.
And how long, would a match last without something like a novice?
No, that's a really crucial part of it because, the fact that it's back on the BBC, live cricket on the BBC, of course, for the first time in what will be more than 20 years by next summer, is a massive part of it. But to get it back on the BBC, I think it had to be that the matches were going to last 2.5 hours or under. Of course, T20 matches currently last around 3 hours, and I go to a lot of them. I was a member at Surrey this year, so I went to nearly all their home games. They seem pretty quick as it is, and I know that it lasts longer than a normal football match, rugby match, or anything like that. But it's still, for cricket, it seems like a very short thing to do. You literally pop down after work and you get home, and none of it's too late or anything like that. But this is going to be 2.25 hours maybe, and that's to allow it to be shown on prime time on the BBC, which maybe is a fair enough trade-off. If in a few years the participation figures are up, we'll probably be kind of glad for it. And the players are very much nominally, at least at the moment, getting behind it. Of course, it could be lucrative for them financially. There's going to be a full draft, almost IPL style, NFL style, taking place later this month, which it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The way everything else has gone. And it would be quite funny if it happened with all the botched sort of announcements and launches and stuff they've had so far. You feel like the lights will go out, or the broadcast won't work properly, or something like that. But no, we're going to have big global stars getting involved. Steve Smith, Chris Gale, AB de Villiers, all these players are very much throwing their hats in the ring.
With all of those terrible team names, and they really are shocking. And with the draft system...
Has everyone... Sorry, Johnny, shall I run people through them?
Yeah, run through, because they are heinous.
Birmingham Phoenix, hoping to rise from the Ashes. London Spirits, bringing something very special to the competition. You'd hope Manchester Originals, not to be copied by anyone else.
1 out of 10 team name.
Northern Superchargers. They've sort of taken
3
the
out of
worst
10.
of rugby league and NFL, haven't they? Oval Invincibles, not to be beaten. Southern Brave, you won't beat them for courage. Trent Rockets, aiming for the stars. And Welsh Fire.
Oh, stop.
Sorry, I'm trying to go out of them on the spot. And they're predictably terrible. We'll go down in a blaze of glory. Perhaps Johnny Bairstow, the sort of marquee, the franchise player there, with Tom Banton and Colin Ingram. Of course, they're combining Glamorgan, Gloucestershire and Somerset.
But with these terrible names and the draft system, is this the beginning of the Americanisation of a very British sport?
Discuss. That could be a dissertation title.
And if it is that a bad thing?
I suppose if it elevates, because we were chatting about this before when we were speaking about the back end of the Ashes, weren't we? And the fact that we only really this a sweeping statement. The kind of interest in the Ashes is there because it's across the board, isn't it? But in between the Ashes, everyone's a bit unless you're a die-hard cricket fan. Whereas this, I mean, you've gone into it with open eyes. It could potentially reinvigorate the sport. Do you feel? In this country?
No, I think it could. It'll definitely attract a new audience. How can it not if it's on TV in places that it wasn't before, and if it's getting more coverage as a result? You know, it's pure and simple that it will get more coverage and be easier to access if it's on the BBC. So in that sense, I don't see how it can lose. It'll be really messing things up if it doesn't have that impact. Johnny?
Well, talking of new beginnings, we've got some breaking news into the Love Sports studio. Neil Harris has just stepped down as manager of Millwall Football Club. He's walked. That seems bizarre.
Well, David, you were watching Millwall last night.
There was nothing in what I saw last night that would suggest that they were going in the wrong direction. We had Steve Morrison on, we're chatting to him, and him and Neil were very much of the opinion that first port of call for Millwall in the Championship should be consolidation. Absolutely. Not one away from home since something like March. The style of football is, I mean, you can talk about the broad aesthetics of what it is to watch Millwall specifically at the Den, but come on, let's get real here. They like winning football matches, and that's pretty much it. I think he was the longest serving manager in the Championship, just over 5 years. This was the start of his 5th full season, and their top scorer of all time, an unbelievable servant for them as a player, and I think he's done very well with them as a manager, getting back into that actual division. So, that's a genuinely surprising state of affairs.
One potential explanation could be at the end of last season, Harris, once they were safe, went on a huge rant in a post-match press conference, and he said, "Listen, there are players here who are shocking." Not in terms of ability. He didn't mince his words. He said in terms of attitude, there are individuals at this football club who are not good enough, and there will be a big clear out. You mentioned Steve Morrison, who you were working with the other day, club captain at the time. He came out and said, if Neil Harris names names, careers will be over. Well, we were promised the clear out. There hasn't been a clear out. Maybe, with the results not going his way, Harris, in reality, behind the scenes, is working with players he doesn't like, players he doesn't believe in, and he's had enough of it.
And the irony of it all, I mean, they're 18th currently in the Championship. They've not won in 7 games. But if you look at the broader scheme of how their seasons began, it's been in their recent history, it's been a pretty decent start.
18th is fine.
Won 2 of the first 3. And then it's 5 draws now in the space of all that. So I mean, that's how you interpret whatever you deem how valuable you see a draw. But I think considering how we've seen him in the last 2 seasons, where they've either started relatively okay and ended badly, or started badly and finished. That was the season before last where they finished really strongly, almost made the playoffs. So I think you've got to look at it in the context of who they're coming up against. It's a very, very competitive league. The bottom 3, the fact that it's got Stoke and Huddersfield in, Barnsley obviously just come up, goes to show that it's very much a mixed bag from, say, 6th or 7th down. Yeah. So I honestly don't know.
And Stoke and Huddersfield as well, a good example of careful what you wish for. Not that he's been forced out by fan unrest or anything.
You're absolutely right.
You know, both those clubs obviously been in the Premier League. They, in Stoke's case, had a manager for a long time in Pulis who did great things, but kind of was eventually, squeezed out, if you like, by a sense that
people got bored of what he was doing.
Exactly, and likewise, David Wagner felt the need to leave Huddersfield because he felt like he couldn't have an effect anymore. He'd lost the ability to motivate the players or whatever. And look at them now; it could easily be a double dip, if you like. And what I'd say, not following the club that closely, just following them from afar a little bit. But the comments from Neil Harris at the end of last season, Johnny, that you just mentioned, they stuck with me because it was an unusual step. It was like what we've seen, really, from Mauricio Pochettino, I feel, at times in the last few months. And a bit like what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said after Man United lost 4-0 to Everton. And that became a very popular one to resurface over the summer after the transfer window. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said there's going to be a clear out, there's going to be a big change of personnel and all the rest of it. And people said after that game, they sold one player from that matchday squad, and that was their top scorer, Romelu Lukaku. Some turnover, right? And you feel like, you don't feel Solskjaer's going to walk away. You feel like Pochettino might, or it might be coming to an end. Solskjaer might come to an end. I don't think personally it will anytime abruptly soon, but it's not going brilliantly. And when these managers feel like they're not being backed, when they feel like, they're not, getting the response they want from the board, if you like, when it comes to their playing squad, they get itchy feet. And Neil Harris can have whatever association he likes with Millwall, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's at the root of it.
You're absolutely right, and I think when you're talking about the context of those managers, if Solskjaer walked, would he be at the top of the list of a lot of European clubs? No. If Poch walked, he would be. I again chatting as we were last night with regard to Neil Harris, very much in the conversation for other championship jobs, but because it was all about the Cowleys or somebody from Europe, his name wasn't kind of bandied about too much. But he's very well respected within the English game of working in the parameters that have been set by Millwall, and what he was getting from a group of players that, as Iku said last season, at times could have been shocking.
Has he had a chat with Stoke City?
I don't know, Johnny.
It's not impossible. There's a job there that could be going soon. Maybe he's just thinking about it.
It's not impossible, but my God, that's jumping out of one.
It is. I'm
burning building into one that's even hotter.
From the fans' point of view, I used to present the Millwall Fan Show here on Love
But
Sport.
that was pretty lively, wasn't it?
It was actually lovely.
Was it?
Genuinely, of all the fan shows, Whisper It, they were my favourite.
Wow.
Really nice guys, really clever guys. No one
You
likes
try
us
playing
talking
there with
podcasts.
long hair and a beard.
No, I wouldn't try that. But that's every Friday at 9, and we had a bit of a reunion the other day. They came in to record an episode of their podcast, and I thought I was just producing it, but they hauled me in to anchor it for a couple of segments. And so they were asking my opinion on the club, and I was like, well, I haven't watched every game. But talking to them about Harris, we had this discussion. There was no suggestion he would go, and even those of them, of which there were a few who feel that the style of football is a bit agricultural, they were all right behind him. They thought he was the right man for the job, and I guarantee you, certainly those guys I spoke to, they will be very, very sad to see him go.
England is the wettest country around, but what do you expect if the Queen's going to reign for so long?
Giving your team the coverage they deserve. Love Sport Radio.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Really? It's just, there's a massive grizzly bear sitting on you. You sure you're okay?
Well, now that you mention it.
Sometimes we say we're fine when we're not. But with 1 in 4 experiencing a mental health problem, if your mate says he's fine, he might not be. Be in your mate's corner and ask twice. Time to change.
You're in leakage, you're in leakage. You're in leakage, you're in leakage. You're in leakage. You're in leakage, you're in leakage.
Tenna men.
Cage.
Pants and pads.
You're
discreet. Masculine.
You're right.
Secure absorption zone. Buy online or in shops.
You're in.
Tenna men. Keep control.
You're in.
No.
If you're in business, I bet you hate wasting money. We Do Taxi Tops can help you achieve minimum wastage on your advertising costs and maximum exposure. Our revolutionary taxi tops can target your potential customers in the right place at the right time, so your message has the greatest potential for making an impact. We Do Taxi Tops. Visit WEDOOH.com. We Do. The smarter, quicker way of advertising in London, supporting London businesses of all sizes.
Exercise. It doesn't have to mean Lycra or a fancy gym membership. All you need is 10 minutes and you. Because a regular 10-minute brisk walk is a great way to get more active. Whether that's walking to the shops or getting off the bus to stop early. Picking up the pace and getting your heart pumping can make a real difference to your health. So, to see how much brisk walking you're doing and how you can fit more into your day, download the free Active 10 app. because there's only one you.
Love Sport.
It's the Posh Boys on Love Sport Drive. A score update from half-time across Europe. Alkmaar 0, Manchester United 0, being, of course, played on a hockey pitch. Besiktas 0, Wolves 0, and Arsenal getting ready for their game against Standard Liège. An exciting and young Arsenal team named by Unai Emery. Martinez in goal, a back four of Bellerin, Mustafi, Holding and Tierney. In midfield, it's Torreira, Willock and Maitland-Niles, and a front three of Ceballos, Nelson and Martinelli, who was so good against Nottingham Forest in the League Cup. We are joined, and very fortunate to be joined, thankfully, by Charlie Hawkins, who was at St Pancras earlier when the Standard Liège fans started setting off smoke grenades and the like. Charlie, are you all right, firstly, and what was it like?
I've just about made it. But on a more serious note, how worried were you two for my welfare?
Genuinely, so when you walked in just now, I thought, I mean, we've done a few of these. I mean, can I hug him? Should I hug him? I want to hug him.
A hug.
Come here.
It's a touching moment. If you're watching on the live stream on YouTube, there'll be a tear in your eyes. Guy, you cutting onions on the welfare front. on the welfare front, Charlie. I'll be honest. As a good journalist, I was primarily concerned about the story.
Yeah.
I was thinking if he's caught up in something, let's get him on the
phone.
Such a pro. But we're very glad you're okay. What exactly was going on?
To be honest, I'm not quite sure. It was a good sing-along. It was a bit of organised chaos. They seemed to be having a great time. The passengers at St Pancras weren't having a good time. Everyone had to get evacuated. Smoke flares. They don't last long, but in that 1 minute, panic strikes. And people, I think the panic was higher because no one knew what was going on.
Was it in full Walking Dead mode, where it's each man for himself straight away?
Yeah, everyone was literally running. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I thought, I didn't realise the 107 was that popular of a train. I thought it was quite empty, if I'm honest.
Well, we're very glad to have you with us, very glad to have you safe. And you are, of course, carrying us forward with those fan shows from 7 o'clock. 7 till 9, it's going to be a lively 2 hours. It's Tottenham Hotspur, fresh off a bit of a spanking at the hands of Bayern Munich.
Yeah, 7 till 9, the Spurs show. Hey, come on, it's cheap, it's easy, that's what I'm here for. No, the Spurs fans. There you go. I've lost my train of thought. No, it is the Spurs show, and look, it's been a tricky one, but I've been keeping up to date. Obviously, I watched the game, but social media, never a nice place to be. It's absolute wildfire, spreading like toxic. I'm hearing they want Mourinho in. Fans want the manager out. Has he peaked? He's lost the dressing room. Delhi's not made the England squad now. It's been a terrible week for where Tottenham are concerned. And just when you thought maybe they had got past it, they beat Saints on the weekend 2-1. They went down to 10 men. They held on for the result. Then a freak result, let's be honest, happens like this. You don't think Spurs are going to concede 7 at home to Europe, especially when they're European Cup finalists. But it's just, again, like we spoke about earlier, panic stations. Everyone wants to heighten the drama, don't they? Heighten the situation. But it is worrying times now. He's almost one of the favourites. Will he stay or will he go?
Will there be a voice of reason in any of that, do you feel?
From the Spurs fans?
Yeah.
Me. Yeah,
you'll be the only one sounding the drum.
Yeah, I will, because I'm actually a big fan of the manager, and look, you can't go from 3 months back reaching a European Cup final. Whether people say, they didn't deserve it or they just about got through their group, yeah, they did, and they got there. Yeah, David, I couldn't agree more. I think when you are a fan and you're in that bubble and you're seeing the performances week in, week out, and it doesn't seem to get better, and we've heard the rumours, speculation. I don't need to go over it. What's happening with Vertonghen? What's happening with Delhi? What's happening with the manager? It's going from bad to worse. And I asked last week, can it get any worse? They said no. Then obviously this week's result. So
well, talking of dodgy results, from 9 it's the Charlton fan show. Started well, but another defeat last time out.
Yeah, another defeat. That was last night to Swansea. Really disappointing there, because they took the lead after 60 seconds and then they just invited a lot of pressure for Swansea. But Swansea are a very good side. They played Leeds and Swansea in the last 2 games. Could have got 6 points, could have got 4. But I think if you would have said 3 before that, they would have taken it. Beating Leeds on the weekend, although Leeds did have most of the possession, had most of the chances, but it was Charlton that took the points.
It was indeed. From 10 till half 10, it's the Southampton fan show. Any strong feeling about Hasenhüttl at the moment?
No, it's a real mixed one. They feel like Ralph still doesn't know his strongest team. They're not quite sure of the style of play. They almost feel like it's one step forward, two steps back. But it should be a really interesting show tonight because we've got Francis Benali on, who's obviously a Saints legend.
And one of the nicest men you will ever meet.
He genuinely is. I've had the chance to speak to him a few times. You know, he's doing, or he's done, 7 Ironmans in 7
mental.
days. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
And then he ran to every ground. So I remember seeing him at Ellen Road, and he'd run from Southampton.
Did that make you feel a little bit insecure, David?
And I just thought, seriously, like introspection kicked in. What on earth are you doing on this planet? What tangible difference have you made? Then got my car and just drove back.
Yeah, fair play.
Good luck with the rest of it, Franny. I'm off, mate.
Well, completing the David Prutton derby from 10:30 till 11, it's Nottingham Forest.
It is Forest, yeah. And again, they're doing well in the Championship, aren't they? They really fancy their chances. I enjoy speaking to them because it slowly has been built over the course of the fan shows. Like, you know, it's good under Lamucci. You know, we fancy our chances. Then last week it was like, well, if we get a result here and we get a result there, and they have been, you know. And this isn't a disrespect to all the other Championship sides, but apart from maybe the top 2, top 3, they're saying that they feel the Championship is a little bit weaker this year overall as a whole, so why not take advantage of that?
Charlie, it sounds like a great few shows. I'll be listening on my way home. Thanks for joining us. Charlie will be taking you forward for the fan shows with Spurs from 7 o'clock. And Guy Watts has some big news for Katarina Johnson-Thompson.
Well, yeah, it's not all tied up and sewn up and sealed and delivered and everything just yet, Johnny, but we're not that far away. Katarina Johnson-Thompson, as we told you earlier, it was going in the javelin, the penultimate event in the heptathlon, of course. She's managed a lifetime best. She's thrown 43.93 metres. And Nafi Tiam, of course, her big rival who's won gold at the last 2 big major global tournaments. She was leading her by 216 points already. Tiam's managed 48.04 metres in the second round of the javelin, but she skipped her final throw. She seems to have some sort of elbow issue, so she won't be able to better that. It means that KJT will almost certainly go into the final event, the 800 metres, her strongest event, with a lead. And how about this? If she can run 2.09 in the 800 metres, then she will break Jessica Ennis-Hill's British record in the heptathlon.
That's
How
2
about
minutes.
2 minutes, 9
Could
seconds.
I do it in 2 minutes?
No, you couldn't, Johnny. No.
Got 800 metres?
800 metres,
That's
yeah.
obscenely quick.
It is quick, Johnny. Yeah, these are really good athletes, like world champion athletes, yeah?
Oh, that's what it's called. The world.
Yeah.
Got it.
You're there, David. You're there.
Franny Benali mode.
And she could even, if she were to run 2 minutes 6 seconds, which is even quicker, she could get what is considered a pretty magical 7,000 points mark. I'm pretty sure it's only been achieved like a handful of times ever, maybe 4 or 5 times ever. And to do it on a world championship stage a year out from the Olympics, wow, what an achievement that would be. Her personal best is 2:07.6, but she's broken so many of her PBs already in the last 24 hours. You wouldn't put it past her to do it again. So it's not all done quite yet. She needs to finish. She needs to run a good time, but she is in pole position to win the heptathlon. By the way, you've talked a lot about Dina Asher-Smith. She's good at the 200, she's good at the 100, but she's not good at 7 events. Heptathlon, it's just incredible. And these are incredible athletes, and she'll join Denise Lewis and Jessica Ennis-Hill in that pantheon of great British heptathletes.
It's absolutely extraordinary. And it also is the end of the show. David, as ever, a pleasure to spend 4 hours in your company. Guy, a pleasure to spend 4 hours in yours. Stay here with Love Sport Radio, Spurs fan show from 7 o'clock. And the Posh Boys will be back from 3 tomorrow.
This is Love Sport.
This Saturday from 8 a.m, join me, Patrick Christys and David Prutton on Love Sport Weekend Breakfast with former England and Lions rugby player Ian Hunter. We'll be with you until noon with all the build-up, updates and analysis of England's battle against old enemy Argentina at the Rugby World Cup.
Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October. This means that travelling to the EU will change. You'll need to check online if your passport is valid for travel to Europe. If you're planning on driving, you'll need to check if you have the right documents to drive and make sure your travel insurance covers all your healthcare needs. To keep your trip on track, check what you need to do at gov.uk/Brexit. Get ready for Brexit on the 31st of October.